The format for this is really simple. Last year, what happened is usually on Black Friday is we do these contests and I just kind of hang out online all day. And it's kind of fun. I throw a bunch of questions and some trivia from Jaeger Sports, and we just give away stuff. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to be hanging out all day anyway. Why don't I invite some friends just to join a Zoom room and then open it up to the public? And so last year we had Steve Springer, Quality at Bats. Shout out to Steve. We had, as I mentioned already, we had Steve Jansen with Baseball Action ID. We had Randy Sullivan, the Florida Armory. And then we had Craig Giannino, who does an incredible job with mental skills, who's now working full-time with Nate Trotsky. If you're familiar with Nate, I'm sure you are. I don't know who's not, but and it's sort of born out of that very organically, and it was awesome. We opened up the room. I loved it because I got a lot better. I mean, for me to sit there and listen to those four guys, what a treat. This year, I look forward to the same. As you guys all know, we're going to have on some really incredible teachers and coaches that I hate to use the word game changers. They're really life changers. So just to give you a tiny bit of background, that's what this is all about. The whole other main angle to this Zoom room is that we've all been to clinics and conventions, and we spend a lot of time listening, which is great. That's why we're there. But as you know, we all have things to share, or we have questions that maybe are nuanced that maybe we want to ask people. So that's the format today. So however long you're on here, and by the way, you can bounce on and off. I'll do my best to keep paying attention to the admit board. But to be honest with you, the main focus today is Q&A. Every speaker coming on has already been given that heads up. They'll probably each do at least a 5-10 minute opening. I know for sure Mike McFerran with the Wake Pitching Lab, I know he's going to talk a little longer because he's got some I think interesting stuff from research that probably he needs to share to get out up front. But I've told everybody this is about Q&A. And so without any further ado, I'm going to open up the floor. I tweeted out a few topics. There's nothing off limits. If you want to ask a question with anything to do from meditation to visualization to a 7-day cycle for a starting pitcher, or why we strongly encourage you to crow hop off of your back leg versus shuffle. These are things, rehab was a thing I didn't even put down there. I have a huge deal with rehab, pitch counts, literally whatever comes up. If you have a fun story or something cool you want to share, again, the idea is this is interactive and this is communal. So I think to do it, because we have 2 pages, probably the best thing to do is either raise your hand if I can see your hand, and if not, you can always put something in the chat area as well. So with that, does anybody want to kick us off with a question or a comment? Chad, fire away.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, man. Man, what a great room. And first off, I know you were speaking to a former Marine earlier, as I'm a former Marine, and there are no ex-Marines, just to let you know.
Sorry.
But I thought I'd start off a little lighthearted. But I do have a question on long toss. And I know it's been covered a lot in here, but I recently relocated down here to South America, working with a lot of immigrants, Venezuelans, Colombians, Dominican, Republic, Dominicanas, and as well. So my question is, they train most every day, okay? Because we have one field to play on, so they train every day, and I'm getting a hard time to get them onto a schedule when they're playing every weekend. playing a couple games, and usually they pitch a couple games, you know, out a Saturday, and I try to get them to stop on Sunday, but it's hard to talk to all the coaches into that. So my question is this, is that how do I get them on what kind of a long toss routine from a 12 to 16-year-old angle would be advantageous for their practice schedule, which is pretty much 5 days a week plus a couple games on the weekend?
Okay, great. And thank you for your service, Chad.
Hey, right on. My pleasure, man. Thanks for this room. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I really mean that. Thank you. And I know I speak on behalf of everybody here and everybody not here in the world. So I'm going to start with maybe a different point of view. Just keep a simple answer. I always look at it this way. I'll be quoting a lot of people. I'd love to do that. So here's my first shout out to Randy Sullivan. The body's made to move. You can write that down and share that with people forever. It's a very, very powerful 5 or 6 words. The body's made to move. So what I'm first going to say, Chad, is this. I would always look from this point of view. Can you just get out there and throw? Yes, as much as we want guys throwing out to 350 feet or 300 feet or 200 feet if they're 13 or whatever the numbers are, it's still about moving the body. It's still about range of motion. It's still about conditioning. It's still about acclimation, right, to your feel. And so that's my first answer, is just to focus more on consistent throwing. Now, you could also say, well, it's the off season. What does that look like, right? Or, you know, it's in season. What does that look like? I just want to give a general rule of thumb is you really want to get them out there throwing. I have parents over the years have asked, you know, I've got a 9-year-old, you know, what kind of throwing program should I get him on? And this is where part of this answer comes from. And I would just say, look, as much as I want to talk to you about a progressive long toss buildup, which I will still do that with a 9-year-old. To me, it's just more about, I'm going to use Jake's line again. It's almost about gamifying. You know, you want to get kids, you just want them to throw. I know a lot of coaches that have been in this game a long time will relate to this line. When I was a kid, and we didn't have social media or the internet, you know, and that probably helped us out a lot. I threw everything. I threw baseballs, tennis balls, I threw rocks, I threw fruit, which probably wasn't a great idea. I didn't know better. I just threw stuff. And I think that played a massive role in me having not only a strong, relatively strong arm, but a very resilient arm. I mean, I think I can go out even today without throwing a ball in a long time. I do play a lot of tennis to do with my band still, but my J bands. But I would say this. The key is that there's something magical that happens when you condition any part of your body smartly and consistently. And so I'm really going to give you that as an answer, Chad, as much as I could go into the details of what a throwing program would look like and build up. And I would just sell them on the fact of throwing consistently, whatever that looks like. I would have players, if they know they need to get a good throw in and they can't, I'd have them do a good band workout, especially doing a lot of forward throwing with the band. See, there's always a way to move the arm. And so I think that's the best way to answer the question. And by the way, for everybody on this call, that was a little bit of a longer answer. I'm going to try to keep my answers relatively short so we can get to more questions. So Chad, did that help?
Most definitely. I mean, you want to keep them moving. You want to keep them throwing. And they just want to add velocity. And I don't want them throwing max velocity every time they're playing. So that's why I wanted to incorporate some long toss. But your answer makes a lot of sense, man. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll give you one addendum because of something you just said, which is we have another rule of thumb, which we tweet a lot, which is only throw with full intent or full aggression, right? If your arm is, first of all, fully in shape and fully stretched out that day. See, I know guys that will they'll go out, let's say they're 300-foot guys and they go out to 220 or 180 on a medium day. And then they might do running guns or they might do heavy pull downs. You can still do like light pull downs and light running guns. You can still do a light pen. But here's a good formula that I just love. You match the intent of your pull downs or your linear, more aggressive throwings after you've gone uphill in your long toss with the percentage of how far you went out. So let's say you're a 300-foot person again, okay, a player. All right, so let's say you go out to 200 feet that day. All right, you can use 2/3 effort or intent to pull down on the way in, which means you're still not pulling down with a lot of aggression. You can get on a mound and throw it 2/3 intent. So to me, it's a beautiful way to sort of safeguard someone throwing with too much intent on a day that they really shouldn't be. And that also goes to your question. So I would just say that to all the coaches as a rule of thumb, it's a big deal. The thing that concerns me about academies is that that's where they might do a lot of training. It's funny because I was over at Tread Athletics about 3 weeks ago, and I think they have an area outside. Not to mention they have like they can get at least 180 inside. But I like, I know Ron Wolforth has done this. I like where coaches pre-plan academies where they have an area on their pull down or aggressive days where the kids can get a full long toss in. As a pitching coach, I can't speak for everybody else. We have a very black and white rule of thumb. No one is throwing on a mound with full intent unless they're fully stretched out. There's no gray area. If you're a 330 guy or gal, you're getting out to 330, period. So I hope that's another nugget that all coaches can take away from your question, Chad, which is be very aware of what your players did on a given day. And if they want to throw with full intent off the mound and they're primed to do that, great. Just make sure that they got here's the formula. Full range of motion allows for full intent. End of conversation. Medium range of motion or medium opening up of the arm allows for medium intent. So I hope that helps. And we'll open the floor up now to anybody else. I see Don Alexander in the house. Hey, Don. Jonathan Compson. Hey, if I don't say hi to you, it's nothing personal. Hey, Greg. Jake McKinley, we have a question. Jake, go ahead and unmute yourself, brother.
Good.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I can read it, but why don't you go ahead and ask?
Oh, yeah. So would love your opinions on this. It's been a topic that we've kind of ran into lately. Underweighted balls, max intent throws, probably off a mound. So seems like the industry is heavily supportive of heavier balls, right? But it seems like the opinions on the underweight balls are a little more polarizing. Some people love it. I mean, our players throw them. So some people love it, but I know that some aspects of player development and medical are getting off of them a little bit. So just curious, like what your opinions are on throwing 3 and 4 ounce balls at max intent a couple times a week.
All right, you're gonna love my answer, Jake. You ready?
Yeah.
One thing I've learned over the years to do really well is I punt really well on anything I don't feel really good about, strongly about, felt it, touched it, so to speak. Anytime we get a question on any type of weighted balls, I just always punt to the Drivelands of the world and the Ben Brewsters of the world and the Wolforths of the world. So I don't really have an opinion, brother. I can only say that I just would go back to our number one principle is listening to your arm. Just feel it. So if you've had experience with it, well, let me ask you. You know what? This would be a great opportunity this is why I like this being interactive. What's been your experience? So we can all learn from maybe what you've seen and done.
Yeah, I mean, I like them. One, I feel like it encourages a guy moving quickly when he throws. I actually think that there's some component of confidence too. I mean, when you throw one of those lighter balls and you're getting a radar gun reading, they're firm. A couple of our guys are throwing the 3 ounce ball like 105. I think it's like a good thing for them to see, like, moving fast can give good results. But again, we've dealt a little bit lately. It's like I said, it's probably more on the medical side that, like the risks while you're throwing a lighter ball are greater and the potential benefits are less. And it's been thrown on our plate a lot. So my experience is great. I mean, I like them, and the sun is really bright. Our experience is great. We like them, and I feel like we've had good results and are having good results, but it just seems like I said, like it's just more of a polarizing opinion once you get to underweight. So curious if anybody else has a take on it, but like we personally like them, believe in them. I feel like the players like them. So, but yeah, curious on other thoughts.
Yeah, I think what's cool too, Jake, is we learn so much from the kids, right? And I think when you're in charge of player development too, you're around masses. Most coaches, unless maybe you're an academy, we're around a limited number of pitchers at a high school or college, right? So I think one thing with the Brewers is you were able to see a lot of kids over a number of years. And so I think your feedback is obviously invaluable. I would also just say one other thing about under and overloading is that I think you have to be careful because like you said, it could be a very valuable tool, right? It could be really helpful on many levels. But I think the one thing I do always comment on is, even though I don't comment on experience of throwing weighted balls under or overloading, but I would still say, boy, you have to bridge it, right? You have to bridge your way into that, right? So it's like training any part of your body, right? So I would say if you do underloading or overloading, you have to kind of do it in measured movements, right? And in other words, you use a regular baseball to get into a certain kind of throwing shape. And then all of a sudden, one day you just pick up a lighter, heavier ball, and maybe you get super aggressive with it. And I think, and again, I don't have the science behind this, but again, I sort of feel like you have to sort of progressively get that animal into shape too, right? And again, I'm not saying I know that for a fact, but that's the thing that concerns me. I know this. It's funny telling the story, but it's a cool story. Some of the coaches who've been around the game a while will know this name, but I actually did a little bit of training right around the draft with a kid named Matt Harrington, who was projected to go really first overall, and I think he slipped to 6 or 7 because typical things that could come up. He was the first player. This is probably 98 or 99 or maybe 2000. He was the first player I ever knew of throwing a quote unquote heavy ball. And what his dad did, which was genius. By the way, this was a high school right-handed pitcher who was throwing 98 at a time that 98 was 110. And what his dad did, which was genius, is when he was like in 8th grade, he started throwing like 1 extra ounce. Then, because back in the day, they had colored baseballs, right? So like yellow was 6 ounces and green was 7 and red was 8 and purple was 9. And I think it went up to 11 ounces, but whatever it was, he added an ounce a year. And didn't hurt that, selfishly, I want to say this, but he was a huge long toss guy. But I always use that mentality when I think about over and under loading, Jake, because I always feel like that, as we all know, there's usually a lot more than meets the eye with a lot of these topics. And I think it's worth mentioning that whatever you do under or overloading, just keep in mind that there is a bridge, right? There's a progression to that as well. And so I hope that helps. If anybody wants to, thanks, Jake. If anybody wants to quickly, because we want to get to some more questions, if anybody has a experience with underloading or even overloading, Jonathan, go ahead and jump in.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm also a former Marine myself and served from 2005 to 2010 out at Miramar in San Diego. But anyway, on to my topic. It's also great seeing everybody, and thanks for putting this on, Alan. But anyway, in regards to long toss, but also in regards to basically understanding your body and understanding the results of your throws and your pitches, because I believe as a pitching coach that the result of your pitches on the mound and the results of your pitches and long toss speak wonders of your body and how to correct and adjust yourself. Can you like dig deeper into that, and what's your philosophies and beliefs on that? And then the second part of the question is, when I'm conducting my automated ball strike system tech work for Major League Baseball, and I'm in the third base dugouts watching the pitchers warm up and the visiting teams warm up, I always see them throwing footballs, and I've incorporated footballs into my training too. I really try to pay close attention to how they go about throwing their footballs, and I see them stretching out to 120, 160, 180, 200 feet sometimes throwing footballs. What is the benefit and importance of throwing a football other than the overweight bearing that it has on it for the shoulder throwing a football at long toss too?
Okay, I'm going to answer the first question, second question first, because that's quicker. Same as I said to Jake, I don't have a ton of experience with footballs. I wish I had Tom House on here. I know he would crush that topic. I've heard things like arm patterning is really good with a football, helps with arm patterning. I would just say, of course, the things about long toss that we love so much, which would be, freedom, range of motion. I think the extra weight forces you to do what we want everybody to do in long toss for the most part, which is throw with arc from the onset. And I think the extra weight in the football, you intuitively know you have to throw with arc because it's a heavier object. So I think that's another benefit of football, is it makes you start out your throwing program that day, if you will, with what we like to call massage throws or arc throws. In fact, I use the analogy all the time of how to start your throwing program on a given day. Doesn't matter if you threw 120 pitches the day before. We always want players starting their throwing program with what we call massage throws. And I always use the analogy of a quarterback throwing a screen pass, right? Just real light touch arc. Minimal effort. So again, if someone else wants to comment after I answer the second part of the question on footballs, I would just say that I would know the basic things that I think that are kind of out there. The obviously, you're adding a little bit of weight, but I have heard whether it's arm patterning or whatever the correct terminology is for it, that it does help maybe clean up the arm, clean up the motion a bit. It's also back to Jake and gamifying, right? It's sort of like cross training, right? So I think that's a benefit as well. And then the first part of the question is really an easy one. I mean, long toss questions for me, I can talk for 5-6 hours on long toss, even though I know it seems like a relatively simple deal. And I'd say it's one of the greatest benefits of long toss is adaptability, variability, feel, mind-body connection. I'd go as far as saying mind-body-spirit connection. I think it's a spiritual experience. You're feeling yourself in space. You're feeling that artistic part of you. Long toss to me is artistic. That's why over the years I've had such a hard time with the linear throwing out the gates for many reasons. First of all, linear throwing, the arms, it's a shock to the arm, but it's also linear. Like I think of linear being left brain, not so creative, not so athletic. We're really about getting into the creativity and the freedom and the athleticism. So I think, Jonathan, hopefully that kind of gets to the core of your question. But there are so many benefits to long toss that, your question really hit more on the feel, the adaptability. Also, here's another thing that I just love. I think this is another thing I stole from Randy Sullivan. I always felt this, but I never was able to kind of put it in terms. And then he taught me really about the idea of variability, proprioception. I think it's another massive piece to long toss that maybe is not talked about as much, or at least didn't used to be talked about as much, which is we're feel. There used to be the thought that if you throw the ball on a line all the time, you're going to create a consistent release point, and therefore you're going to be more accurate. And we kind of come from the opposite point of view. We want variability. We want the body coming out of perfect mechanics, so to speak, in long toss, because we want to feel all that variability, all that proprioception. And then we want to get the athlete out. And then let's put that athlete back now into more of the, let's say, how the body is intuitively wanting to move, right? And so, and I've always also just felt this is one of our principles too, that proprioception and variability with release point and long toss actually leads to better accuracy because you have better feel. So I think those are some of the pieces, Jonathan, to kind of get to the core of your question, but I appreciate it. If anybody very briefly has some feedback on benefits of throwing the football. That's why this is interactive. You know, we don't know all the answers, so feel free to chime in. Give a very quick add or two to the benefits of throwing with a football. And if not, let's move to the next question. We got Dr. Lauren Bailey in the house, who will be a, can I use the word presenter? Featured guest at, I think, 1:45. The floor is open. If not, you guys, you're not going to want to hear me start. I'm going to start singing. That's where we go. And the floor is open. I just start. It's not even karaoke. It's not Randy Sullivan karaoke stuff. It's actually I will just start singing. Or you know what we can do? We'll go into a little meditation. Let's do that. It's 11:29. We'll angle toward the mental game, which is of course life. We'll do a 60-second. We'll make it super simple. I know my guy Sheets is on here somewhere. He's going to appreciate this. You're going to get official bells. So I'm going to ring the bell, and for 60 seconds, here's what I want you to do. And this will make some good fodder to talk about. Is I want you to see if you can actually allow, so here's some buzzwords for you, okay? Allow the mind to do whatever it wants. So a lot of times we think about meditation and mental practice as being very concentrated, and we don't want any thoughts, and we're trying to get thoughts out. And yes, we do want to get to a quiet, clear, calm, relaxed place. But this is one of the most important tools I can teach you about mental practice in general, and really life in general, is this idea of allowing the mind to think about whatever it wants. So we're not resisting. We're not controlling. We're doing the opposite. We're letting go. Think about that metaphor of playing sports or in life. We're letting go. Pitchers that throw a great fastball, really let it go. Second, I don't want to give you a lot. This is a short meditation. So allowing is number one. Number two is be neutral. Neutral, neutral, which that means is similar to allowing. When thoughts come up, instead of, here's a strategy I love, instead of taking the dance with the thoughts, which means engaging your thoughts, right? You're not taking the dance. You're not pushing the partner away either. You're just allowing the person to be there, right? So you're being neutral. Okay? Now the last thing is, so I'm giving you three real big buzzwords, right? Allow, neutral, and the third one is sort of what's a little more active. It's called redirecting your attention. Now I'll give you an example more on the field to bring this home, but this is really more about life. I'm on the mound, and now my mind's got 17 things going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is allow my mind to think about whatever it wants: the score, the stands, the weather, my ERA, whether there's a pitcher warming up in the bullpen. So I'm going to let my mind do what it wants. Then I'm going to be neutral to the mind. So I'm not going to take the dance. It can still think about whatever it wants to think about, right? I'm not taking the dance. Now, part three is I'm redirecting my attention back to my process, which we haven't talked about here today. We can talk about it afterward if you want, but that's the single most important piece we teach to the game management part of players we've worked with, is we teach them about the process, which of course is for on the field and off the field. So my process as a pitcher is breathe, for my meditation principles and a lot of other reasons. Look for my focal point, attack my focal point. That's it. That's my process. So that's where I'm redirecting my attention to. Now, for the sake of the meditation, it's a minute long. Redirect your attention maybe back to your breathing. That's not a thought. That's a great place to go. You can redirect your attention back to, hey, you know what? It's nice just to be quiet. I don't have to do anything. Okay, so you can redirect your attention back to laying on the beach. You can redirect your attention to floating on a magic carpet. You can literally go wherever you want. Okay? So in review, when you hear the bells ring And you can just immediately tune into your breathing if you feel like that's a great place to go. I think it's a great place to go. You can go to your breathing. You can go to the moon. You can go anywhere you want, but the whole idea is to not engage the thoughts. Allow them to be there. You don't have to block them out or push them away. Allow them to be there, including anything going on in your body. Allow it to be there. Be neutral, so don't take the dance with the thoughts or what's going on. And then redirect your attention back to where you want, which is not a thought. Redirecting your attention is an action, like breathe, focal point, attack. My process hitting, breathe, see the ball well, hit it hard. See how fast that comes out? I have a process for a 4-foot putt. I have a process for a 30-foot putt. I have a process for if I'm going to speak. I have a process for everything going on in life, because to me, there's a sense of presence about that, just knowing where I want to be. And one last thing, which is getting kind of deep, which is where I love to go. Ultimately, where you want to be is you want to just be, right? You want to just not think about riding the bike. You want to just ride the bike, right? You don't want to think about pitching anymore or hitting. You want to just do it. You want to be unconscious, so to speak, instinctive, intuitive. So in a way, this little meditation is a practice of just you being free and intuitive and flowing and not having to do anything. Even if the mind's still thinking, you don't have to do anything. You can redirect your attention, but you also don't have to do that. You can just stay with whatever that neutral state feels like. Got it? Make sense? Okay, so you're going to hear the bell in a second. We'll do 60 seconds. I will make this official. Get my stopwatch out. I officiated a wedding about a month ago, and when they had their phones up at the altar, I knew now that, okay, you can kind of do your phones almost anywhere. So I'm doing my phone in the middle of a Zoom session. All right, so when I ring the bells, just have fun with this. Gamify. I'm still in Jake. I'm using Jake a lot here. Gamify. Just enjoy that you don't have to do anything for a minute in life. You can just hang out in your chair. Let the chair do all the work. Think about that for a second. Let the chair do the work. You don't have to do any work. Let the chair do the work, or the floor. Allow any thoughts to come up, anything in your body. Be neutral. And then just stay in that neutralness, or if you need to use some activity to direct your attention to something, just direct your attention to something that's not a thought, that's more of a feel, like floating, or the beach. On your mark. Get set. Amazing what 1 minute can do in life. Like, as much as I kind of have going on, not that you all don't have a lot going on too. I'm trying to manage, people coming in and out of the room or in the room, but I already feel something shifted in that minute. I mean, I can go into detail what it is. Basically, I just feel a lot more present, a lot more in tune, a lot more connected. But I'd rather hear, for now, feedback from you guys. So if anybody has, I know it was only a minute, but a lot could happen in that minute. So if anybody wants to share, feedback from that minute, I'd love to hear it. Fire away, Bill.
I noticed that after it, my shoulders relaxed, even though I had no thought at all on my shoulders, but I can actually just feel just less stress right now. It's weird. It's I wasn't really thinking that. I think it was just a change of my physiology, just changed everything else that was going on right around me. So that was cool.
Thank you. Really, really powerful. I'll give you a line I'm going to steal from someone I've done some work with. She's really one of the leaders in the field of mindfulness. Her name is Dr. Shauna Shapiro. She teaches up at Santa Clara University. And she said something to me about 8-10 years ago in a workshop that just, talk about resonating. You become what you practice. You know, if there's one line you might take away besides, well, they're all important, you know, allowing, being neutral, or redirecting your attention. But this is another nugget. Speaking of Nate Trotsky, Nate calls them nuggets. It's another nugget. You become what you practice. If 1 minute allowed you just to relax your shoulders unconsciously, or you just felt just a this, and that's a feeling that you want more of, so to speak, right? I'm giving you just a metaphor, of course. Hopefully, of course. Then think about everything else in life. What about the brain getting quieter, the brain slowing down, the body feeling looser and free? How about you being more in your intuition or instinct versus the thought? How about being more present as opposed to the future and the past? So you become what you practice, and that's to me the core essence of meditation, is that it's a practice like ground balls and fly balls. You know, we do things physically because it just seems normal and it's physical, and maybe we get tangible results quickly. But for just a minute, Bill, isn't it cool how like something pretty noticeably shifted? And that's the purpose behind always wanting to do some form of meditation with groups. Anybody else? The word allowing or neutral, did anybody have some feedback of what that was like? Playing with those words maybe for the first time. At this point, you can just unmute yourself if you want to share something.
Hey, Alan, this is Jonathan Compston again. As anybody who knows me within baseball, I'm kind of an energetic spark plug and energy plug. So my brain, I have an over analytically driven brain, so it's always on and on the go 24/7. So when we practice that exercise there, for me, the allow portion of it was really something that resonated with me, because I don't really dig deep into allowing myself to just be in the moment and think and feel. And so for me, what it did was it calmed my mind down, it relaxed me, but it helped me to focus on, I mean, ideally nothing, and just allow myself to be in that moment. And when we came around to the end portion of it to redirect everything, you know, for me, I thought about putting. I love golf, and putting is a relaxation tool and a mental therapy tool for myself living with mental health, that really has, in a way, saved my life to control my thought process and how I approach things. But I've never really heard those three words put together in that sense that allowed me to put this to use, to be even, you know, with the winter training schedule coming up with the guys that we'll be working with in December, January for on ramping and other purposes. You know, this is something I really was hoping to learn from you to be able to apply it to our guys, to help them to just be free and allow themselves to be in the moment. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. It's very powerful. And I think that's why, you know, I started teaching this in 1990. And as much as I've gotten into long toss and throwing and coaching in general, You know, this to me is still, sorry, we got a bomber sighting. Actually, a real, not a Zoom bomber. Um, yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I think about to myself, because I went through a very challenging time in my junior year at Cal State Northridge, and I think about, I always kind of say this whenever I've spoken, is if I have 5 minutes to teach, as much as, trust me, just, I love talking about throwing, long toss, all the connections to it, whether it's pitching, what have you, and but I feel like you can really change someone's life um, in a matter of minutes if you can just teach them some things that I've learned along the way, and I've been practicing for 35 years. You know, things like, what does it mean to really be quiet? You know, what does it mean to not be in the future and the past? You know, what does it mean to step back from your thoughts and not be your thoughts, right? Be neutral. Just be. Be with whatever's happening, but you don't have to do anything about it or judge it. And and so I know when we get off the Zoom today, and the funny thing is that Sheets is coming up next, and he'll be crushing this too. Which is that I hope that this is a springboard for everybody that's hearing this, and hopefully people that maybe watch this on recording. It has a chance to change their life and start thinking about life differently. Like, oh, let me take a few minutes out of my day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Start getting quiet. Start practicing being neutral. Right? Start practicing allowing my. I don't know how often this is talked about in schools, but if our kids knew that it was okay to allow their thoughts to be, but you didn't have to identify with them, right? They didn't have to run the show. You know, here's something I've never said before. I got to write it down. That's why I have my notes here ready to go today. But what if we let silence run the show? What if we let silence run the show? If you study the zone, for instance, right? Some of the main characteristics of the zone, where there's many, but one of the most essential aspects of the zone is what's called the absence of thought. I mean, your mind actually may be thinking, you just don't know it. That's the irony. The absence of thought. In Zen, it's called no mind, no thought. And we all relate to that because we all know that when we're not thinking and we're trusting our instincts, we're having, you know, we're having a really good game. How about maybe the best game of our life? You could apply that off the field too. So this whole idea of letting silence run the show. The opening line of my book, which came out in 1990, to tell you how far back that I've been into this idea of silence and a quiet mind, is silence is perhaps the greatest teacher of all. That's the opening line of my book. I'm going to plug good old Getting Focused, Staying Focused from 1994. And I feel like of all the things that, you know, maybe just giving you a little more sidebar on the mental side of the game, the mental side of life, is I would say that silence seems to be the theme that I come back to the most, you know, or being quiet. Not that there's not a lot of other really important things to learn, but try it. Try it for 3 or 4 days in a row, even for 5 minutes. Just sit on your favorite couch, chair, and lay down, and just try to be quiet. Meaning, your mind can still think. You're just the watcher. It's called the silent witness, actually, in meditation terms. You're the silent witness. You're allowing your mind to do what it wants to do. You're just watching it. You're just not engaging it. You're not taking the dance. And so I would sort of challenge you to try that for 5 minutes for 3 or 4 straight days. I think it will change your life based on my 35 years experience or whatever it is of teaching this and feedback. But like I tell players about everything in life, you know, try it. Try it for a few days. If it doesn't work for you, maybe it doesn't work for you. But maybe it's also the greatest thing that you ever have applied to your mental health and your, you know, your peace of mind. So that would be, again, if I could give you one pitch, pardon the pun, for this section of today, it would be spend more time getting quiet. I want to plug something if you don't mind. I'm usually pretty good about shameless plugs, but a former CSUN player actually did this. Some of you may have seen it. We've posted it quite a bit. It's called The Art of Quiet. It's on YouTube. Came to my place in Santa Monica. He's a storyteller. His name, I've just blanked on Paul's last name. Paul Tremlin, Tremlin. Paul Tremlin. Played at Cal State Northridge. He's got an academy out in Kansas City now, I believe. Great, great guy. And he wanted to do a storytelling about meditation or the mental side of sports and life. And so it's only like 4 minutes and 50 seconds, but it's on YouTube. It's called The Art of Quiet. I know I've sent that to people and they've just loved it and they've shared it with their teams. And so I think that's another great place to go is to start playing with this idea of being quiet. And DM me after a few days if you do it, because I can almost assure you, as Bill sort of gave us a little taste of it, some things might notice I use the word significantly. Some things might significantly change in your awareness and your way of looking at life or how you feel. So that was a long tangent. We've got about 10 minutes before I cue this up for sheets. If you have anything else, sorry for doing this. If you have anything else.
Hey, Alan, it's Lauren.
Hey, Lauren.
Do you have any quick bits on like a kind of a breathing 101? You know, we have these subconscious activities always operating in the background, and the thing about like your analogy, you know, riding a bike or walking or breathing, and we'll talk about vision later, but you know, all of these subconscious activities are going on, and there's a few like breathing and vision that we can take over and have a very meaningful conscious control over that can help us shift that mindset. So and where you and I become little buddies is how breathing and vision are similar, but yeah, any kind of a breathing 101 that we can apply to our athletes.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I always go back to the idea of counting your breath. I find that for someone who's more of a beginner, I would say if they have a lot of thoughts, the tendency could be that they're very distracted and it might be hard for them to just do something like watch their breath. So this whole idea of counting gives them somewhere to direct their attention toward. It's still active. I still would prefer them to try to be more inactive and, you know, more like lay on the couch and just go for a ride. But the counting can be really, and also I just got this from a yoga teacher friend of mine. She said the other day, which made a lot of sense. Our body likes rhythms. So kind of the inhale 1, exhale 2, inhale 3, exhale 4. So you count the half breath. And you just have them count to 20 to start with and see if they can get to 20 without losing concentration. So you gamify, there it is again. You gamify it and just see if they can get to 20 without losing. You tell them if you lose track, you don't lose, it's okay, right? But you can use that. Another metaphor I like is sort of just getting to know your breaths. You make it curious. You tell them, hey, I want you to be the greatest private investigator in the world. I really want you to tell me everything you can find out about your breathing. Like, what's the pace? Is it loud? Is it quiet? Is it fluid? Is it short? Is it quick? Just do inventory on it.
I like the word inventory.
Yeah, do an inventory on the breath. Because, oh, by the way, the breath keeps us alive 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So clearly, it's very, very important, besides a million other reasons, right? So let's get to know it. That's another question. We talked earlier about being quiet. When was the last time you spent time intentionally being quiet? Well, when was the last time you sat down for the sole purpose of just getting to know your breath? I mean, I don't know, maybe that sounds heavy. Not heavy. I don't know. Maybe it sounds like, but if you did, your breath is an amazing teacher. And that's something that is hard to explain until you discover it on your own. But if you just spent a few minutes every day just watching your breath, observing it, listening to it, learning from it, it's unbelievable what our breath, it sounds funny, our breath can teach us so much about life. And as obviously you know. So I think really to answer your question, a very simple counting of the breath to 20 is a really, really good starter. But I also like the idea of, sort of getting to know the breath and discovering the breath. And the only thing I'd add to it is you might diversify a little bit. You might try a few different types of exercises. By human nature, we all like a little diversity, and everybody's different. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Now, there's been some studies on this concept called open monitoring. And it's where you have to close your eyes because there's so much visual input coming in that it takes up too much of our brain. So to close your eyes to decrease that visual input. And the studies showed that 17 minutes of being fully interoceptive, meaning listening to your breath, counting your breath. If you need more input than that, then like counting your heartbeats, if you can feel your pulse, feeling, that itch on your left shoulder, or the pressure of your booty in the chair, or the soles of your feet on the floor, just being aware of our bodies. And if you can focus on that for 17 minutes, even one single practice of that can dramatically and permanently increase your ability to focus on whatever you're learning, whether that's how to pitch or how to play piano or, just whatever skill you're working on. And so sometimes the best way to engage, this is a Rick Rubin quote. Rick Rubin's a big creative guy. He's a record producer, and his new book, one of my favorite quotes is, sometimes the best way to engage is to disengage, and to get in that wordlessness and to let images come to you. So that's what I love about your work. Your important work is how to teach athletes and humans in general to be interoceptive. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, Lauren, send me the research on the sort of the disengaging, eyes closed, because it goes hand in hand with so much stuff that I've practiced myself and believe in, but also, and Rick Rubin, by the way, he was on 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, and he is an absolute treat. If you don't know Rick Rubin, look him up. He's one of the top music producers in the world, and has been for a long time. Yeah, but
have you read his new book?
What was that?
Have you read his book?
No.
So good, you'll love it.
Well, the whole idea of again, disengaging, it's amazing. I hope everybody tries doing some meditations with just allowing your mind. By the way, allowing your mind to think about whatever it wants is actually disengaging from your mind. Right?
Alan, can I
Yeah.
So my son he's 15. I think he's got a pretty advanced approach to little heads up baseball approach, but I'm saying he's got an approach from that I think is pretty good at the plate. And he was playing for a coach, and I see all these coaches, and I see Tom Hansen there in his picture, and so I'm like, he's been playing for a coach, really good team. And this guy just is in his head at third base every pitch. So if he's looking for something in, if he takes any strike, the guy's body language goes nuts, and he's he's like, I'm trying to and normally he just lets it go. So my question is A, how to deal with it, but B, we got coaches out there, and I think, is that a good thing for him to learn to deal with when he's got somebody's kind of disrupting his pattern rather than, is that kind of a good thing for him to deal with, that he learns that, hey, it's not always going to be smooth. Coaches are going to be up there. So not only your opinion, but what coaches think is like, hey, I mean, it's every pitch and this guy's going to be chattering in his ear. Do you learn to ignore it? Well, you don't want to ignore your coach. I mean, it's like this whole circle that he talks to me about. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to give advice, and it's like, it's a pretty tough one for me to give advice on, because you want him to respect the coach. You want him to have an approach. His approach is different than maybe what the coach wants. And so it's like this whole circle of frustration when he's played for this coach. And so anyhow, that's my question.
It's a great question, and it's going to be a perfect transition into our next speaker, Sheets. And I'm going to give you my 2 cents, and I think it'll be a great way to open up to Sheets with his take on it. My short version take is as follows. I'm saying this joking. I'd say to transfer your kid right away, but I'm joking. And part of me is not. There's a place in life where how much critical instruction is to a point where it's really doing damage, right? And then how much of it is just, hey, tough love. You got to learn it the hard way or whatever. You got to learn to work through it. So look, I have to know the situation very closely, but if it got to a point, and I've been in these situations before, where it's so toxic or unhealthy that you sort of need to take the child out of that environment, right? Now, I'd say in a lot of situations, it might be something that the kid just has to learn to deal with and work through, and it could end up being a great teacher, right? So I'm not trying to say it's like panic button everybody right away, get the kid out of the environment. I just would say, number one, be honest with yourself and survey the situation and go, okay, is this just really good teaching moments for 3 or 4 years in high school, or is this too much? That's number one. And number two, regardless of the situation, I would go back to just trying to really get my kid at a young age clear about a few really important principles in life. One of them is the process, meaning if you're a pitcher and you know that the only thing you can control that is going to lead to the best pitch of your life right now, forever, the best pitch of your life is if I'm in my breathing, I have a focal point and I attack it, or whatever his process is. What happens is you start realizing that once you're into your process, which we call constants, 3 constants or 4 constants, whatever they are, everything else is a variable. And by everything else being a variable, now you can say, well, everything else is a distraction or drama. And so what it does is it starts to it's like a demarcation line. You start realizing that it's still not fun to hear it, and it still can kind of be rough. But when you start realizing that it's just a variable, it's just drama, and it doesn't matter, I got to breathe, see my focal point, and attack it. So I got to be great at my process, no matter whether it's my coach, the stands, the count, my ERA. None of it matters anymore. I just have to lock into my process and know that the coaches, as you said, I'm going to turn into a positive. The coaches' practice of me hearing a distraction and learning how to let it be. Hey, what a shock. We just worked a minute meditation on letting things be. Hey, you become what you practice, Dr. Shauna Shapiro. Practice being neutral in the meditation. Hey, maybe that carries over into life too. On the mound, I'm getting better at being neutral, and I'm getting better at redirecting my attention back to the process because I'm working on that in my meditation every day. So I'm going to cut myself off there because I am hyper sensitive to doing this, moving along in our.
That's awesome. It's
Yeah,
like Tiger Woods' dad trying to mess with him when he was putting. It's like, and it's for him to at least try to deal with it that way. So that's fantastic, though.
Yeah.
And I agree with, if it's toxic, you gotta just, you know.
Yeah. But I know Sheets will have something to say, but before he does, I'm going to do my best. It's going to be tough to do an intro for Sheets. I'll just start off by saying he's one of my dearest friends in the world, and I get better every second being around him. I can't say it any simpler than that. I don't need to go into all of his accolades because I'm sure you guys all know Sheets. I will just say that from a culture, leadership, mental skills, mental health, um, emotional IQ, and a learner. He's a learner, and I know one thing he'll do in this hour, so to speak, is he is going to bring a lot of passion, and you'll see he's very inspiring. I can't say too much, Sheets, because now I know I'm almost setting you up for too much. But I know this, that anybody that's going to be on this call for the next hour, really obviously all day, it's a treat. You're going to get a lot out of it. And so, as I mentioned with our format, Sheets will have an opening and he'll say whatever he needs to say. But the main idea, of course, is to get to your questions. So, without any further ado, Sheets, take it away, brother.
Well, number one, I appreciate you guys being on here with us. I thought it was interesting that Alan makes a big point about disengaging right before I come on. I thought that was interesting. One of these guys to disengage with the presentation. Back to your question, Bill, really quick. And Greg just put that in the group chat. I think it's a great opportunity for communication as well. Everything that Alan just said, absolutely dead on. It's a great practice in real time to direct your thoughts and decide what you want to pay attention to or not. But it's also a mature, coming into your own as a man moment to sit down and from a very growth mindset place. Look, coach, if you want to know how to coach me better, one thing is this: I don't know if I like directions from the third base coaching box, and that's just me. And if you want to get to know who I am and what I'm about, that's my direct feedback. And then at that point, it's the coach's opportunity to decide how he wants to interpret that information. So, Greg, I completely agree, and Bill, I hope that helps. Yeah, so excited to be here with you guys. I hope to bring some value in some form or fashion, and I want to answer every question. I'm like Alan, I'm going to be hypersensitive to getting answers out and getting on to more, because I want to make sure that you guys get the most out of this. I'll be real brief in this opening, and Alan said it, and it's probably one of the most, I would say, life-changing statements, that 5 words can mean the difference in everything you do, is that you become what you practice. And I constantly get messages or calls or text about, how can I be better at this? How can I improve at this? How can I make this jump in coaching? How should you become what you practice? If you want to be a more selfless leader, then you've got to have the awareness every single day just to consider being selfless, dying to your ego, being more humble. I want to be a more humble leader. Great. Be humble right now. Practice humility right now. And over time, day by day, the process takes care of itself. You're going to become what you practice. And as we were getting going here, I was reflecting on, as many of you have probably met through ABCA and that critical 4 years of a sabbatical for me, but it was everything that has changed everything after. You talk about a move where, if you really want to be about a growth mindset, then become what you practice, create resources, spend time in those resources. The podcast is for coaches, but man, those messages were for me too. And I didn't know I was going to come back to this side of the ball, but man, it was preparing me for these moments to put all those messages and all those lessons. And again, if you're constantly hearing things from a place of true humility, which is, man, I don't have anything figured out. Teach me. Let me understand your perspective. Let me listen to fully understand where this person's coming from, not listen for something to click with what I already believe. I think that is that's a growth in itself. Again, you become what you practice. Some of that is being present. just working at being present with every person you connect with this conversation. You know, I've got 2 kids and a wife at home, and I had to leave them as we were kind of lounging around the couch. And, you know, I didn't want to do that, but I also can't be there on the couch with them right now and be present with you guys. I got to be right here in my office. I got to be dialed in with you all. And it's easy for me to separate those 2 worlds because over time, practicing being present, you become what you practice. So I hate to keep throwing the Jaeger Sports dagger at you, but I'm telling you that those 5 words have more depth than many of us understand. And I hope that we grab it and we apply it to the areas of our life we want to be better at. I know there's some fathers and some husbands and some wives that are on the call. I'm constantly in a space, man, I want to be a better father. I'm going to practice being a better father. What would that look like right now? Being present. What would that look like right now with my son or my daughter? I want to be a better husband. I'm going to practice being a better husband. And over time, you become what you practice. I would open with that. But again, I'm here to talk about any and all topics. Anywhere you guys want to go, I'm all in.
Love it, Sheets. I'm more present because of that last piece, man. You're just present.
I'm babe.
Yeah, and by the way, you guys, if you're new to just joining, we're kind of just we're winging it. So you can raise your hand or you can put something in the chat room. At this point, really, because we haven't had any Zoom bombers yet, thankfully, you can even just unmute yourself. Sheets, I don't know if you were on, but I told them at some point if they didn't have any questions for me, I was going to start singing.
I heard, yeah. I'm just going to start calling people out.
Hey,
Chris,
Sheets, I got a question. Oh, go ahead, buddy.
No, Chris, no, you're up, man. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, couple of things. First off, if for those that are not on this Zoom, if you don't pay attention on Thursdays to the ride in, you might want to start doing that because there's some great, as we've said earlier today, nuggets every Thursday that are dropped there, and so I appreciate that. And just want to let you know
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Those mean more than you might know. So keep doing it. When it comes to being present and being mindful of the situation, whatever you want to call it, I think one thing that's important that I've had to learn is you're only responsible for yourself. Because as much as you want to be present, that doesn't mean everybody else around you is present. So how do you handle that as a coach, knowing that that's the culture you're trying to create, and understanding that maybe, and there's definitely going to be somebody in the program that at some point is not on board with that, right? So how do you handle that? How do you communicate that with the players, your staff, the guys that are around you? How do you handle that as the guy that's leading that program to bring everybody around?
Well, that's a great question. It's taken time, that's for sure. I mean, I hate to say that it's a process in itself, but it really is, man. I think, you know, it's like telling a kid 10 times and you still got to tell them the 11th. I mean, that's coaching 101. But it's the same with building your staff. It's the same with building a culture. You can't just pick 5 words like integrity and selfless, and you can't just throw them on a wall and expect that everybody exhibits them. You have to live them, and you have to remind them, and you have to redefine them. And, you know, the core covenants in our program, I've referenced at least weekly. They come up in some form or fashion. And so it's the same with being present. I remember that was, as you were saying that was a big piece of my first few years here is this matters. And, you know, those have been around our program and know Alan's been between our 2 walls. Man, that's part of why we do classroom a certain way. That's part of why we have little cultural things and tips that we do that help the guys start to snap into this matters. This moment matters. This conversation matters. Chris, I think there's also a piece of there's communication that is involved in that. I think elite communicators can keep people present. I think when you suck at communication, people suck at listening. And it's really that simple. And if you practice the art of communication and you make sure that you're engaging and that you're passionate and that you are present, then the right people are going to be right there with you. And there is moments where I'm in classroom and I can tell a kid's got something on his heart. I can watch his eyes kind of
again, shake around the room or follow something. And that's usually a sign, man. And again, I think if you're incredibly aware, it's a sign for me. I got to get to that kid at some point in this practice, figure out what's going on, find out why he's not as engaged, maybe as he was yesterday. There's probably something on his heart. It's probably something he's dealing with. I don't take this instant, again, 5 years into this, I don't take it like an instant sign of disrespect. There's likely something going on. And I mean this in the right way, we're way past buy-in here. Like that's not even two word I ever use. We're way past that. It's keeping guys right here, right now, and engaged with what we're doing and why we do what we do. And so when I see it, I know that there's a signal. It's like body language. It doesn't ever whisper, it screams. And so when you see it, you go, all right, man, there's something more to this kid. There's something I gotta spend some more time on. But it's to me, it's about how you lead and who you are as a leader. One of the greatest compliments I got a couple of days ago, we had a couple of exit meetings, and we got a big week ahead of us full of exit meetings. But one of them was, Coach, how consistent you were every day. I've held on to that, and I've chewed on it, and I'm trying to relish in that moment, because that was one of my goals this fall, is to be completely present, which I knew would allow me to be authentic, which I knew would give me the opportunity to be consistent. And I never wanted there to be a day where they went, oh, Sheets is in a bad mood. Oh, man, Sheets is on one today. I wanted to be incredibly consistent, because I can't preach consistency if I'm not consistent as a leader. I can't preach being present if I'm not completely present with every single interaction I have in my program. So I hate to funnel it back to the top, but man, you have a great opportunity as a coach to be the leader in the clubhouse in whatever dynamic or characteristic you want to live in your program. You have to exhibit it and then redefine it and bring awareness to and shout out and accentuate. When you see it and you see it from one of your players, you got to amplify that moment. That's what being present is all about. It's not just, again, from my shoulders. That's what it looks like from a player perspective. And you're always finding these ways to call out exactly what you want in your program. And I think, obviously being present is the epitome of one of those. I hope that makes sense.
And I just
But
want
it
to
absolutely makes sense, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that, because I think as a leader, no matter whether it's on the field, off the field, in business, doesn't matter. If you're inconsistent, your program, your culture is going to be inconsistent. And one of the things that I've heard a long time ago, and it stuck with me, was, why is McDonald's so successful? Why do people love McDonald's? It's certainly not because of the taste, but it's because it's consistent. You get the same Big Mac no matter where you go in the world, and that's what you look for. So that's really what, as leaders, that's what you're selling, is that consistency, but you have to do it yourself. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Sheets.
Yeah.
just want to add something too. God, Sheets, it's amazing how it just, you're pulling that presence into me, second by second. And I'll be very brief because this is your time. When I went through yoga teacher training in the 90s, one of the instructors said something that really affected me. I think I'm kind of built this way, but she really affected me and got me to a different level. And she said that, because this was part of teacher training to go out and teach yoga out in the world. I actually went to the teacher training course to teach it more privately with our players. And I wanted to learn about yoga, and I loved stretching. So, I put the mind, body, spirit all together. And she said, the one thing you have to do when you come to a class each day, right? Because you're coming to a class in the public and you've got 20 people coming to your classroom. You have no idea what happened in their day. You have no idea where they're coming from. And she said, you have to, here's the two words, you have to show up. She said, it doesn't matter whether you had a good day or not, or this is going on or that is going on. She said, you have 20 souls that are coming to you for guidance, for nurturing, for help, for exploration. And you have a job, no matter where you're coming from, to show up. And I just wanted to hammer that home on top of Sheets' genius answer, in that if you become what you practice, it's what you practice, it's what you exhibit. But also, if that helps you, take those two words and remind yourself, part of being consistent, as Sheets said, is show up. I'm telling you, if you start practicing showing up throughout the day, There you go. It can really, really change. And Sheets, I love something you said, and then I'm going to be quiet, which I love how you actually thought of to make sense. It's all you. You know, you went to the depth of thinking about how all fall, just like a player wants to hit, you know, we want to talk about the process, not necessarily goals, but, you know,
Yep.
player wants to be prepared enough to hopefully hit 400 versus 300, whatever. They have goals. And I love the fact that you thought of a goal as a coach that, you know what, for 3 straight months, obviously for you, it's all year long. But I
Yep.
want to make sure at the end of the fall that the players are going to be able to say, you were never not consistent at any moment. And I just think that's a powerful concept just to be aware of. And anyway, Sheets, I love that. And let's keep rolling right along.
Love it.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to Sheets if I could.
Go
This
Blue!
is Stu Jaeger.
What up, Stu?
Thank you, Sheets. Sheets, so good to see you. Congratulations on the great new job in Chatham.
Thank you,
They're
sir.
lucky to get you. They're
Thank you.
very lucky to
Appreciate
get
that.
you. And I think you're going to have a great time there. And the 5 words are magical, whether I'm a CPA, whether I use it as a CPA or a dad or just with my girlfriend in any way whatsoever, being nice to people or practicing what you preach or whatever, those words are key. And I had a question. I hope this isn't off topic for you, but I worry about pitchers who have a routine that they like of long toss and J bands and all that stuff. And they might get a pitching coach that has a different philosophy and it wants to get them out of their groove. And they're kids, and so they're kind of intimidated to talk to the pitching coach. What would you recommend to them to do? And thank you, Sheets, for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. That's a great question.
Thank you, buddy.
I would start with this. I would start with, from the player perspective, and there was a great video, and I want to say it was Adam Wainwright, I believe, from the Cardinals, and he was in the bullpen, and he made a comment to work hard, not to be a slave to your routine. And that's so powerful on so many levels, man. Like, we're the most superstitious group of any of the sports, and I do it as a coach, man, where I put my pen and where's my foot standing on the ledge and where does my arm, but I think as a player, there's a different piece of the routine can build confidence, but it can also build a stale routine. I think sometimes you've got to reevaluate and stay open to adjustments or, really using real-time results to help you redefine what your process is. So I think you can never be a slave to it. I think if I'm a coach, I think any coach worth their salt is going to evaluate what he sees for sure, but he's also going to use the numbers in front of him as a measuring stick. And the way we present it in our program is, if at the end of the fall, you hit 260 and you struck out 20 times, well, 2 things are pretty, again, present with me right here is that, number 1, you're not a great hitter. Number 2, your 2-strike approach sucks. And that's not me being critical of the kid. That's what the numbers are telling me. And again, if you came in here as a transfer and you hit 290, well, man, we got work to do. There's things we can improve on. So when I come up to you and I say, hey, man, take me through your pregame routine and what you do, and the guy just lays it all out there, and I go, cool, man. So what are we going to change? Because if we keep doing the same thing, man, we're going to get the same results. Something's got to shift here. So what's a drill? What's an idea? What's a mechanical change? What's a mindset switch? What's a pre-programming thought that we can add to this to shift to go this way? As a coach, I think it's, from both perspectives, player and coach, you got to meet somewhere in the middle. And I think too often as a coach, and like you mentioned, in the spirit of being a new pitching coach, sometimes that new pitching coach comes in and goes, well, I appreciate what you've done, but we're going to do it this way. And I think that is such a failed comment and direction in leadership. I think it's, hey, what have you done that's gotten you success? Let me look at these numbers so I can understand how you define success. And I can go, okay, well, man, I've defined success this way. So these are the numbers we're going to hunt. And this is where we were with what you did. These are the numbers of where we want to go. Here's some tweaks, some adjustments. Let's work together to figure out what routine might best suit you, might get the most out of you, might make something click that can take you down a new road, and you can build a new routine. And so I think sometimes we kind of put up the wall, and it's a guarded place. And I don't want to get too in depth here, but it's a guarded place of protecting your ego. And one dumb redneck's opinion, I think you put up a wall and you go, "Nah, I can't take that coaching," because you're trying to protect your ego. Nah, my ego says this routine is what really works. And once again, son, you hit 260. So you can protect that all you want, but you won't hit 260 in this lineup because you won't play. So if you don't, we got to dive into this and start making some shifts, because we got to get you to 360. So how are we going to do that? And I think it's got to be, you got to meet both ways. I think players need to drive their own cars, but there is a part where the coaches are the guardrails. You're not in the car with them, but you're the guardrails. So you're both on that same highway. And I think you got to meet them in the middle. You got to cross that street and get to halfway so that both of you can work together, figure out what a better routine would be. Hope that helps, Stu.
Oh, that helps so much. Thank you so much, Sheets.
You're the
I
best,
really
brother.
appreciate. You're the best too. I'm going to follow you and make sure you have a great career ahead.
You're the best, man.
Thank you. Go Blue.
Absolutely.
Go Blue. That's Stuart Jaeger from Woodland Hills, California. Checking in. Biggest Michigan fan on earth.
What else?
Hey, Sheets, I got a question for you. It's Jonathan
Yep.
Crumpston here.
Yep.
Hey, I wanted to ask a question based off of influence. And one of the big aspects that I've been challenging myself with as a player development coach and within coaching has been surrounding the word influence. And whether that is, well, let me backtrack, because I really truly believe that leadership is influence, more or less. And there's two parts to this question, but what is your philosophies and how do you or is it even something that you look at setting the precedence for within influence? For example, like when I did coach collegiately, I always looked at my players and studied them from an observational standpoint to see who my influencers were, whether that was the good ones or the bad ones, and how do we go about figuring out how the influencers that lead the wrong crowd down the wrong path, are the ones that kind of cause dissension between a team, how can we bring them back on track with the influencers or who are striving to fail forward and achieve success through a platform of creating that culture? But also, what is your philosophies on influence as a coach too, that you like to pour out into your players? Sorry, that was a long-winded question.
It's okay. Not a word that I use, to be fair. It's not a word that I've probably spent any time thinking about until you just said it. It's just that's not a word that drives me. I maybe I don't think in those terms. I redirect it the way that I would pursue it here is that, I think we're all example leaders. I guess this is going to be the best way to start it. We're all example leaders. And I think when you ask your players about leadership on your team, I bet 95% of them consider themselves example leaders, or, would say, no, I'm more of an example guy. Well, we all are. As you walk around, whether or not your teammate's going hard in a drill, whether or not that coach is here, or if he's, got his nose in his phone and he's somewhere else. And so I think part of hopefully what we're building here is that culture, man, is every guy, you got to be all in. There really is no wiggle room. And I know that seems, I gotta say it from my perspective. If he's a bad person or a bad influence or whatever, he's gone. There's no questions about it. Life is too short to hang out with turds. And I got zero interest in that. And so call me a bad college coach or whatever, brother, but I'm not going to spend time with bad people. And so we need to do our part by recruiting the best people that we can on the front end. And then we've got to see the opportunities to influence, there you go, them in a way that showing them the example of what we expect, how we operate here at GGC, how we communicate, the standard at which we train, the standard at which we are as teammates. Again, our core covenants. I think you got to be completely in the process of those people have to live your program every day. And that should, to use your word, influence the guy next to him. It should persuade, it should push, but all that to me is we're pulling the standard across all fronts. It's not just 3 guys living the standard and everybody's chasing their tail. Dude, I expect 35 guys plus a 7-man coaching staff to live our standard. And I'm unforgiving on that. And I'm unapologetic about that. This is the way it has to be. And again, I don't think you build a program in a way that you're having to reach back and pull people forward. I think you're going to struggle to go 500 and you're going to finish 5th in your conference. That's just what it is, man. So you got to look yourself in the mirror and go, man, I got to be better at getting the right people around me. I got to be better at making sure that we are doing what we can on the front end of defining and redefining and presenting. And think I've grown in a lot of different ways. I've been certainly more in the visual sense this fall, and I've done more PowerPoint looks. I've done more videos. I've done, again, different ways to connect with the different members of our audience, but it's all back to the central themes of what we want. So kind of a little bit back on your question, affirming, and that's a Coach Murphy deal from Alabama, is find those moments and affirm them. And when you see someone doing something on the field or in classroom or, in your scrimmage, man, you've got to put a spotlight and then get everybody behind that spotlight looking at the same thing. Just so we all see what just happened. That's exactly what we're about. That to a T, that answer in classroom is exactly the mentality we're trying to have. And so I think we're always trying to pull kids into the spotlight so they all have a chance to, again, kind of actualize who they want to become in our program. So I'm sorry, that's a couple different shots on that one, but that's what I got.
I appreciate you answering that. Thank you so much for everything, for all that.
Sure. Keep them coming. Let's roll. I'm getting fired up.
Sheets, I got one for you.
Go ahead.
And we have kids sometimes that take coaching and correction as negativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand for sure that communication is for sure key. But what is some of your, what is your take on this topic, and how can we better, have kids receive coaching and correction as a positive as opposed to a negative?
Again, going off I believe it was Gino Oriema on Twitter a few years ago. Correction is not criticism. And to your point, Jeremy, and I hate to always direct it back to this, but I firmly, if you can't tell, I firmly believe in the power of communication. And if your kids aren't getting the message, we always point the finger at the kid. He just doesn't get it. Well, maybe you just suck at talking.
Water, light, ice, no limits.
Hey, Roderick, I'm not done yet. Hold on real quick.
Hey, Roger, if you can hear us, I can get to work on this.
It's all good. I think there's just these things as a coach, we always say it's the kids.
Oops. Jeremy, unmute yourself. Sorry.
I can't hear him.
If there's a car wreck out in front of our school, you can blame the people that were driving the cars, but it might be the lady out there directing traffic. Like, it's the coach, man. And I think sometimes it's way too easy to these kids and these parents and man, I get them in your program and define what correction looks like, define what coaching looks like. I showed that video to our team. I remember it was 2 years ago. I showed the video to our team and I said, you got to understand, man, this ain't criticism. Nothing we do is personal. Like, it's never personal, but you came here to be coached. The expectation is to be coached. So you're going to get that. And if you personally let your feelings get hurt by that, man, that's a decision that you're making. But we're not making it personal. No different than if a player comes in and goes, Coach, I've got these gripes. It's not personal. It's from a player perspective of his coach. And so I think we've got to kind of own a little bit of that, Jeremy, that where that player's not quite grasping the way that maybe your spirit or the heart at which you're walking into that moment. But I would challenge you as a coach that, hey, maybe your communication strategy isn't the best per that kid. Once again, as we all know as coaches, there's kids that cannot take being screamed at across the field. He didn't hear anything you said, but he instantly put his guard up and he instantly shut down and he's instantly pissed off and he's embarrassed. And the next time you try to, it's just not going to go well. There's kids that you've got to figure out ways to Oreo cookie it, man. You've got to come over and give them a little, a little something positive. You got to love them up a little bit. Then you got to hammer home the nail. Then you got to back end it with another piece of cookie. That's simple coaching, little league strategy stuff, but man, that shit works. Like there's just guys that need to be communicated with differently. And I think when we blanket approach all of our kids, man, you're missing targets. You're a bad shooter. You're missing targets on a lot of those dudes. You're hitting 3 or 4, but you ain't hitting all of them. And I think so we try to, from the minute they get in our program, there's a main message that's coming from our classroom. And I always say this, it's not communication and it's not clear communication. It's crystal clear communication. And there is a big difference. And so what I try to define for them is that you can't listen to anything I just said, add your own twist to it and go, yeah, I'm pretty sure that he meant this. Nope. It was exactly what I said. That's exactly the way we're going to do it. That's exactly what the expectation is. That's the fix. That's the correction. That's where we got to go. And you don't have to sit back and go, I wonder if he was trying to. Nope, wasn't trying to. Very blunt, very to the point. And we try to build our coaching strategy off that. Once again, it's not personal. But if you're never laying out exactly where you want to go, the kids don't have their own internal GPS. You as the leader of the ship, man, you've got to set them off on a course and go, we're going this way, and this is what it sounds like. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. Affirm it, continue to define it, and make sure they stay on the boat. And so I challenge you, Jeremy, to maybe pull back a little bit on how you're approaching every individual player. But I do think it's a team message of, man, remember, this is coaching. Coaching is the ability to, again, see something and try to fix it. As a player, your role in that is to hear that information, interpret it, and then apply it to your game. And if there's ever a moment we need to go more deep on something, let's meet after practice. So let's pull me off to the side and let's do, I think, opening the doors of communication. I feel like, Alan, that's the theme of this talk is communication 101. But I do think it's incredibly important in our profession.
Yeah, hey, great answer. Appreciate it. And then also, did you mention a video? Because when we got bombarded there by Rodrigo or whoever it was, did you mention a video?
Yeah, I feel like it was Gino Oriema. I could be off on that, but it basically, it's correction is not criticism. That's the message.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. I know we got Mitchell. Mitchell, feel free to unmute yourself. And I know, was it Greg? Someone else threw it in the chat room, but we'll get to you both. But Mitchell, why don't you go first? And then whoever it was, it might have been Greg. You follow up Mitchell with the question. So Mitchell, fire away, brother.
Yeah, this can be for any. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. This can be for really any coach who wants to pitch into this. But I've been an assistant for, this is my 10th year, but first year at this particular school. The head coach said in the past they've had issues with pitchers going to their individual lessons or coaches during the season. Is that something that you would put in the front of the room or for everyone to hear right away? Like, hey, you're throwing our bullpens with us during the season? Or, I mean, I'm not claiming to know everything, but I think it's more of a team building thing than anything. Your catcher's getting used to your pitchers, stuff like that. But
yeah, no, Mitchell.
Last year that was a big issue with this school in particular. So I kind of want to put away with that and want them to see the reasoning behind throw your bullpens in practice.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think we have a little bit of that here. I think when we're getting 21 to 24-year-old dudes in our program, there's a swing coach somewhere. There's an offensive dude they rely on from back home, and and I don't run away from that. I mean, I encourage that, man. Okay, if that's that's what you need and that's what works. I said, but I think the perspective from our program and our stance is, remember, there's one dude with ink in his pen that fills out lineup cards. And, if you want to stay true to what he's teaching, but it contradicts what we do, man, this won't work out for you. I can tell you that it won't. Now, again, if you can be here with us and present with us and grow with us and fit him in, then go right ahead. And that's where I would put my stance in terms of the high school program.
Right.
I mean, this is our program, and so that how can we throw you if you're not throwing bullpens with us? Now that may suck because usually that kid that's out there doing that's probably pretty good.
Right.
But I think it's a way for the head coach or the coaching staff to go. But man, if you oh, if Chelsea could hear me say this, I'm gonna borrow a line from a good friend, Aaron Tippin. Anybody that's a redneck like I am, little Aaron Tippin for you on a day after Thanksgiving. But you've got to stand for something, or you fall for anything.
Right.
And I think if you don't, as a coach, stand up and go, hey, this is the way we're going to handle this, and you may not like it, and that's okay. You don't have to play here, but this is how we're going to handle this situation. If you're not throwing bullpens in front of our coaching staff with our catchers in front of your teammates, it's just not part of the team. You're on an island doing it on your own, and that's not going to work here. And so again, same thing with our hitters. They may have a guy they go hit with, but again, if we made some adjustments or again, mentality switches, or we worked on a couple of things and we saw the value in it and we communicated it and we had an exit meeting about it and everything went great, but you come back a different guy, then I'm going to evaluate you as a different guy because you're not the same guy that was here that was all in on what we were doing. It's up to you. It's completely your choice. There's a lot of freedom in this world. And so it's up to you if that's how you want to attack it. But just know that it has to fit back into our puzzle piece. And if you don't fit our puzzle, then you don't get to hang out at the dinner table. And so that would be my stance on that, if that helps.
Right. I kind of pushed it a lot in the fall just to get them kind of used to like how I am. I don't want to, throw in schedule and stuff like that. And then just right away, instantly, like, hey, I'm going to my guy tonight. Do you mind if I kind of like stepped on that real quick.
Yep. That a boy.
It's slowly but surely. It's so far a lot better than the last year from what I've been told. But
yep. There you go. Keep rolling.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mitchell. Appreciate it. Greg, why don't you fire away? I know, Brill, you have your hand up. We've got a few questions here, so we'll try to get you in order. Greg, fire away, buddy. Nice to see you.
You bet. Thank you, guys. Coach, I know you and Alan
great to see you.
On the front lines of implementing and teaching meditation into pre-practice and competition. I'd just like to know, when you're working with new athletes, that this is a new experience to, what are your words? What's the connection that you get them to buy in that goes from the laying down, the meditating, and so on to competing at a high level? Thank you.
Absolutely, brother. Good to see you. I'm going to start with two words: care level. I think if you, again, show them that I'm doing this out of pure care level, I'm a sacrifice, as a coach, that's our practice time. I'll put this together, and if you really want to build an environment that the practice is the coach implementing a plan and a process to get you prepared to go play, and the games are for the players, then I'm going to take time out of our practice plan to invest into you. That's pure care level. It matters. So I would start with those two words. Again, I'm so rejected by the buy-in word, but I get it. I understand it. I think starting from a place of, again, I care about you. I'm going to invest this time. Investment's a great word. I'm going to invest this time into you and your mental health. You get out of it what you put into it, which is a little bit of you become what you practice, but it's true. And if anything in life, you get out of it what you put into it. So if this is an area that you struggle in or an area you want to improve at, then I'm going to give you an opportunity for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to work on it. And then also think too, and Alan and I have talked about this, and I know he's not all in on this, but I've tried to make a couple program shifts this year, is that I've created flexibility in our mindfulness time. So 20 minutes was 20 minutes and it was great. But if I went a little long in classroom, or we had a guest speaker and he went or she went a little bit longer, then all I've done is taken the practice schedule and I've bumped it backwards to fit in this 20-minute segment. And I've just made a hard truth that we start stretch at 2:00 no matter what. And so we've had 3-minute sessions, we've had 5-minute sessions, 10-minute sessions, and that flexibility, I think, again, helped me remain, big C word, consistent. But for them, showing care level that if you give me what you can from 2:00 to 4:30, that's all I'm ever going to ask out of you. When we stretch, from the time we stretch to the time we finish our last pitch of BP or whatever it is, man, you give that time to your team, 2:30 to 4:30. That's all I'm asking. But I have to make sure that they're on that line stretching at 2:00. So that flexibility, I think, showed them, again, back to care level. Man, I prioritize our time, but also prioritize yours. When I tell you 4:30, I'm a man of my word. We're going to be done at 4:30. So I think in your plan, maybe figure out a time that works. Like, hey, it doesn't always have to be 20 minutes, but I want to make sure that we're using this time wisely. It forced me to get really creative, which I loved. There's a lot of things. I know Al and I could go 30 different directions in guided meditations, but there were just things that I had to make fit on the fly, looking at my watch going, all right, you got 4 minutes. What are you going to do today? And I think when our guys recognized that, the man coach wasn't going to play with that. There was, to your point, buy-in, because I'm going to stay true to what I told you and how we're going to run this. I think there's such a bigger message back to that player saying consistency. It stemmed from how we treated classroom to mindfulness to stretch. That segment of time was incredibly consistent based on our schedule. If that makes sense, Greg.
And I just want to add a very brief note to that. Sheets has played around with his time of actual meditation time, but you have to keep this in mind as well. The whole day, in a way, is a meditation in Sheets' plan. I know I've been there. I've spent a lot of time around his program. I spent a lot of time around him. And so I think part of this is that, yes, it's the buy-in to start the practice out, which to me is vital. You're creating consistency there. But also, it's not like they do their meditation and then they're on to their day. You know, if you know Jeremy and you hear the themes out of his mind, it's constantly a reminder of being present, right? Of care level, consistency. And so I think it's just want to make a note that to also remember that, as I learned during my yoga training, that you don't leave the meditation in the meditation hall. You take it with you. And so I think it's important to note that however many minutes they do it, first of all, they do it, but secondly, Sheets has a high level of awareness that the meditation is still happening through the practice, through a lot of different principles. And so I just wanted to add that piece. I know we've got about 15 minutes here. Dr. Lauren is on deck. So let me just go to the chat room because I want to do this in fairness and order.
Yep.
So we got Greg. And then the next question is Matthew Chandler. Let me just read it real quickly. As coaches, we often promote our players to create a mental breathing routine, whether they are on the mound or in the box. But once we step foot in that third base coach's box, we start verbal chaos that does not allow the player to disengage and lock in with their routine. Any suggestions for those coaches? Appreciate you.
I would be incredibly conscious of what you say in the game. And I'll give you another word that I love. I love care level, also love intentionality, and being incredibly intentional with what presence do you bring the coaching box, which in tune is your dugout, which in tune is the batter's box and the mound. I think being incredibly, a better 2 words would be emotionally intelligent. I think pray for it. It's feel, beg God to give you a heaping of it tonight. I think emotional intelligence is one of the lost arts of coaching, but I think it's, in simple terms, it's just feel. You know, if you were in the box, Matt, and good to see you, brother. If you were in the box and I stood, 10 feet behind you, and I just kept just going. Hey man, just make sure you don't step in the bucket. Hey, make sure you get your rhythm and time on board. Make sure the barrel gets there. Palm up, palm down. Keep going, man. If I gave that to you, who would you be? You'd be a train wreck, just like all of us would. And so, I've since moved to the dugout. And I love being in the dugout and running our offense from there because it gives me a chance to have these conversations, because we talk about our offense as one big conversation. We're all, again, working on the same thing. We're all trying to pick these guys apart. We're trying to find moments of chaos. We're trying to put pressure on the defense, but it's one big conversation. So I can lean over to the guys in the hole or on the rail, and I can converse with them. I can lean over this side and talk to the guy on deck. When the guy steps out of the box, man, there are very few things that I'm saying to him that aren't just intentional, repeatable, and simple. And but let me go back. We have built that into our practice plan. It's not just, hey, when we get to the game, I'm going to say nothing, or hey, when we get here, I'm going to speak differently. Man, this is what we've done in practice. I'm not shouting stuff all the time at them in practice. There's a lot of freedom to explore and freedom to figure out. But once you start to get in tune with your kid and, again, have a conversation and go, man, what works for you? Man, I'm focused on being real simple, man. When I'm up there, just be real simple. Want to be direct, slow things down. And you just hear that and go, great. This kid loves simple. He wants to slow things down. So he may step out. Hey, man, stay simple. Hum, babe. And I'm just giving him what he's saying. And we're already in tune because I've listened to, again, the cues that he likes to give. And I'm just going to give them back to him. But I hope that's something that our kids would say, man, stay out of their way. I think as coaches, you feel like you're in the batter's box with them. You are in spirit, but not in reality. And you definitely don't want to be in there between their two ears. Let them have the at-bat. Let them have the moment. Let them figure it out. But it's theirs. It's not yours. And the kid doesn't walk away and go, well, I probably would have had a better at-bat if coach would have shut his mouth. I want him to walk away and go, probably would have had a better at-bat if I smoked the first pitch fastball I saw instead of taking it and then getting into a place where 3 pitches in, I'm still pissed about the fastball that I took. But if I do a better job of managing the moment pitch to pitch, I'll bet I'll be better my second at-bat. Now we got something to coach. Now we got something to work on. And it was his, and he owns it. But I think you got to build, obviously, hopefully, an environment that would produce that. Alan, I'll go right to the next one because I'm reading it, and I'll read it out loud. My boy Butch, leading Chatham this summer. How different will it be coaching players for 2 months instead of 12? Will your approach change because of the short time you're going to have to impact them? Butch, I appreciate you, man, and I appreciate the question. You're absolutely dead on. I got 2 months to get 12 in, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. One of the things that I know is going to be different is, man, I got to be authentic to who I am, but I also know I can't be the same guy at Georgia Gwinnett that I'm going to be at Chatham. And I've got to, it's a different environment. It's a much different playing environment. There's different stressors and spotlights and all kinds of stuff. One thing that I do is I want to have more fun. And I know that anybody that's been in our program, we have fun, man. It's super positive and upbeat. But man, I think that environment, man, you've got to kill it with kindness. And there's already so much that they're worried about and thinking about. And, there's 80 scouts in the stands that they know are there and I know are there. And I think we got to keep things loose. We got to keep it fun. I've got to do an even better job of that here at GGC. But man, I really got to be that dude for those guys for those 2 months. And, connecting, that's one thing I try to pride myself on as a coach, is being able to connect. I got to connect with these dudes quick, and I got to get to know who they are. So it's a lot of questions. And I think that's a powerful tool we need to use more as coaches, is we ask more questions instead of, again, talking so that people know who you are. No, man. It's like, if you meet this girl at the bar, I'm thinking back 20 years when I used to drink or go to the bars. But if that girl, if she asked me a bunch of questions, like, and I'm answering, I'm like, well, she's trying to get to know me. She's trying to, she wants to get to know who I am. Man, she's really into me. Well, she just may be an investigative reporter. Like, you really got to get to the core of where's that coming from? Like, are you really trying to understand me? Do you really need this information? How are you using it? And I think it's the follow through. I think asking your players questions is one thing and getting the information. But the next day to reference a point or to come back to it a couple of days later, or to find a moment to interject and go, hey man, it's kind of like you with this, this, and this. Man, coach was listening. And it just creates this instant connection that, man, those words matter, dude. I wasn't just asking to fill the air or seem like I was interested. I really want to get to know you. So, Butch, I think being incredibly intentional, bringing care level up there, I think those are the starting places for me.
Fantastic. Sheets, you got about 7 minutes.
Yep.
We got also a hand up with Bill. He's been waiting a little bit. So I know there was one other question about your classroom, translating that to.
Yep. My boy, Jonathan, classroom agenda and how it promotes your practice plan. So, and I've talked about this before too. We kick off every day at 1:25 Eastern time, 1:25 every day, 1:25. And we've got a classroom right down the hall here. All of our players, all of our coaches, they're usually in there at 1:15, 1:20. And usually we start a couple minutes early, 1:23, 1:24. But we're in there and we're rocking and rolling by at least 1:25. Part of that is I want a touch point with every single person in our program every day. I want to see their faces. If we just rolled out to practice and jumped right in, and you guys know how this is, as an offensive guy, there's going to be 3 or 4 pitchers. I don't even know if they were there. And I don't want that. I want a place where they're in these chairs, they're looking up front. I see their eyes, I see their faces, and it gives us this touch point with all of them. Now, what happens in our space? Those dudes come in and it's bro hugs, it's high fives. They're getting to see their teammates. That again, it might be their roommate, but they haven't seen them all morning, or they haven't seen them since 6:30 left, and it's just it's a bunch of daps, it's laughs, but once we get on the same page and we're moving forward, it's getting the group here right now on our screen is the practice plan. And we go through all the various aspects of the practice plan. Here's how we're going to rotate. Here's what you can expect. Here's a new drill. Here's what that looks like. We detail it out. And then we generally have some type of message of the day, whether it's a conversation I had with a coach that he said something that I've been chewing on. I just want to get it out and discuss it with the team, a tweet or a video or something that I saw on social media. I'm big into scrolling through TikTok right now. I know I'm completely part of the problem. I'm addicted, and I stay up late at night and I flip through TikTok, and I can go 1,000 ways on that. But I'm also like clicking likes, and on Twitter I'm clicking likes because I want to reference those videos again. And so I'll go back and direct copy that link, and I'll make a folder of powerful tweets is with the folder, and I'm putting them in with a little description, and I'm putting the link. And that way, if I'm ever like, man, I'm really, again, correction versus criticism, or a leadership principle. I'll give you one because I feel like being funny right now. There's a great leadership moment if you go to Pulp Fiction, okay? And it's when they arrive at their buddy's house with a dead dude in the trunk and the wolf comes over. If you take that segment, and it's about a 3-minute segment, you got to pardon the curse words, but when you watch Winston the wolf go through how he leads that room, it is crystal clear communication. There's a little rebuttal back. He handles it like a G and goes, no, this is how we're going to do it, and you're going to follow my lead, and this is how we're going to move forward. That's leadership communication 101. And so I may show that Pulp Fiction video, and the guys laugh a little bit, and I said, but hey, what do you take from that? Dude, he wasn't messing around. Dude, it was crystal clear communication. Nobody in that room could have misinterpreted what he meant or what he needed them to do. Isn't that how you need to communicate with your teammates? When a dude is not showing up to the moment and he's laying ground balls, and when you see it, you think, man, that dude must be soft. Why isn't he putting his chest in front of the baseball like I am, then picking it up and getting it out? You've got to walk over and not go, hey, man, it's okay. Just make sure you get the next one. It's not okay because that guy's on first base and the ball's in left field. You have to be the wolf, and you have to step up and go, hey, man, I'm not about that, and I'm going to speak for the other 34 guys that are out here. We're not about that either. So the next time he hits a ground ball, it's got a little top spin on it. We're going to need you to get your left shoulder involved, put your chest in front of it, pick up the baseball, and go get it out because that dude's out. Every time he hits a ground ball or infield, they're out. And that's what we do around here. That's the wolf. And again, you go back to that conversation in classroom. So trying to give them something that's tangible that they can take to the team and their development and their leadership and their communication and their ownership and their responsibility and their accountability, no doubt. Many of you saw we've done a lot of things this fall, and we've done the last couple years, Toolbox Tuesdays and Appreciation Wednesdays and Hero Highlight Hardship. Just use that time to build the room. And so, you know, one of the things I'm very conscious of as a male, and sometimes the only male figure in their life, because I have several kids that do not have fathers. I think part of that is, man, I've got to show them what being a man is really all about. So on Toolbox Tuesday or Appreciation Wednesday, and for sure on Hero Highlight Hardship, is you got to show them what vulnerability looks like. And you got to help them break down their walls. If you're trying to build a team, they don't need to just recognize who they are as players. They got to recognize who they are as people. And when you start to break down those walls, they connect as humans. And if you believe in someone's story, you're going to cheer for him louder. So if you really want mudita, if you really want vicarious joy and another success, they got to connect on a human level. And so using Classroom to connect the group, that way we can walk down together to do mindfulness. We can walk out and again, dominate stretch. That's what matters in terms of that classroom session, is getting the room tied together so that no matter where we go, like sticks in a bundle, man, they cannot be broken. And I think that 25 minutes or 20 minutes or 15 minutes, however long we spend in that classroom, to me is the most critical time, more important than any BP session we take. And there you go. You got 15 seconds until you got to introduce Lauren. Lauren, go crush it. Thanks, Al. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
By the way, Sheets, thank you, man.
You're welcome, brother.
You talk about just to put this together,
Sure.
Awareness is arguably one of my most favorite and I think most meaningful words in my life. But Sheets talked about awareness, feel, presence. It's 12:59, and he's mindful of the fact that we have another guest coming on, and the fact that he was aware to do his thing and politely, out of consideration, be ready for the next speaker. I don't know. It's sort of symbolic, really, of a lot of things he obviously said today. It's just amazing. One of the things I think selfishly I love about these Zoom rooms is I get a lot better, and it's also inspiring. It's inspiring to see people come up here and talk, and the questions are great. And so Sheets number one, obviously, thank you for taking time out of your day to help us all get a lot better. And in a selfish way, thank you for just being here, man, because I appreciate it, and I know everybody else did. And Sheets is so good about like being available. Trust me, if you have follow-up questions, if you didn't get to a question today, just shoot him a DM, get a hold of him. It's automatic. He'll get back to you probably in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So Sheets, thank you, my man.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
And by the way, I will be tweeting body language screams at some point today.
There it is.
As an FYI. Dr. Lauren Bailey. Doc, I've got to go with a little bit of my reading on this, and then I'm going to do the non-reading part of the introduction. Let me get someone in here that is ready for you to crush it. So let me give you, so Dr. Bailey is a doctor of optometry in Plano, Texas. She went to Texas A&M University and the University of Houston for her training. She's been in family practice for 12 years. She's the founder of Sports Vision Institute, West Plano Dry Eye Anesthetics, Low Vision Institute of Texas. And what I want to say is the way Dr. Bailey and I met is, well, I wanted an answer to a question that's been bothering me for a lot of years. So I have an article called Batter's Box Management, which is the mental side of hitting. And there's a bunch of drills in there. And one thing that's always bothered me watching hitters, and in particular, especially left on left, which is a whole other topic we could do a Zoom session on left hitting, is why it seems like left-handed hitters, even at the major league level, are constantly pulling off the ball. And I knew as a hitter, what made me feel so good about hitting is one of my favorite drills, and I know Perry's coming up next. We'll love to hear this. and Perry and I probably talked about this 30 years ago. I don't know if he remembers, but from the time I can remember practicing going to the cages for my own games on Sunday, is because of the mental side of hitting. And Doc, I'm going to get to you quickly here. Is I had a drill. I went to the slowest cages that was basically like slow pitch softball. It was like 40 miles an hour. And I played a game. There's gamifying again. I played a game with myself. Can I let this 40-mile-an-hour pitch travel to where I was on time, but hit a line drive down the right field line? I'm right-handed, with authority, and keep it straight. All right, so that's a lot. Slow pitch softball pitch, but I had to wait just long enough to generate enough energy, but not be early enough to hook it or late enough to slice it, but to keep it straight. And then I'm hitting it down the right field foul line, not to right field, the right field foul line. And I know Tony Gwynn once talked about a drill he used to do where he would try to hit behind him in the cage, something like that. Anyway, the purpose for me doing it was helping me with seeing the ball better, being more relaxed, being more patient. Hitters generally tend to get a little bit out here, if you will, until they maybe do a lot more mental training. And so I've been in that world from a very young age. And so when I see someone lifting and pulling and all that, it's very, very frustrating to me. And I know it's a big thing with left on left hitters. And so especially, and that's a whole nother topic why. So I reached out to Dr. Bailey. We ended up having a conversation. We did a Zoom session, and she taught me a word that really affected me because it sort of gave me the answer to what I was feeling. And essentially, I'll let her talk about it, but it had to do with Ryan, if you could mute yourself, Ryan. Thank you. I got you, Ryan. She taught me this concept of fixation, which essentially, and again, I don't want to steal her thunder, but it just has to do with staying present on the act for an extra split second or whatever that means. And so anyway, Doc, thank you for making time. I know vision training is blowing up, and you're a leader in this field. And so we just appreciate you being here and shedding some light on vision training. And so it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that intro. And I'm beyond flattered that you asked me to be on today. Thank you so much. And one thing that you just said that resonated with me in that intro is that you would go out and play a game to prepare yourself for the next day. And the concept of play is just basically like the science of it is low stakes contingency. You know, you're in your own brain, you're in a safe space, you learn what works and what doesn't work. And so that gives you that feedback. And I feel like and please forgive me, I know there's a lot of coaches on this call, but that's where we can run into the problem with overcoaching. We need to play more. And play is not just willy-nilly silly, it's science. The kids need a place to be able to make mistakes without any contingency. So I like your word play. Play is important. But yeah, I'm beyond blessed to be able to have pulled in some of the neatest people for this sports vision project. You've inspired me a lot. So thank you so much for what you've done for me. Because I don't know what you know, and you don't know what I know. And so for us to build a team and a panel to bounce ideas off is incredibly powerful. Yeah, but like Alan was saying, there's more to vision than seeing 2020 or 2015, 2010, and the sports scene knows that vision is important. And not just vision, but timing and anticipation, that's all a part of vision. And I've heard athletes and parents and coaches say, you know, just things aren't right with these athletes' visions, you know, and we have them to send in to get their vision checked, and the eye doctor's office sends them home with a good report saying everything's fine. They can see 20/20, but we know something's off. And so as a clinician, it's our job to ask why and what do we do about it? What's actionable? These kids, you know, they hear, you know, try harder, bear down, you're not disciplined enough, keep your eye on the ball. And that makes them tighten up more, their mind races, they can lose their rhythm. And where I have a heart for these kids is I know from my own personal experience, sometimes they just can't keep their eye on the ball. It's physically impossible. If you have any oculomotor issues, if you have a problem, a breakdown in the system, hard work and determination are not enough. And so there's often a reason why the system has some kind of interference or glitch. Many physical mistakes and errors are preceded by a sensory breakdown and may take a little more digging to find. And there's very, very often a diagnosis with viable solutions. So we'll ask our athletes, sports relevant questions like, do you tend to swing early, swing late? Do you tend to miss left or right, short or long? And this isn't just baseball. I mean, we're talking to hockey and basketball and tennis. So again, it's one of the biggest challenges learning all the nuances of all sports, all positions. But general questions too, like balance and inconsistency based off of, this is a important game or a non-important game. This is a game early in the day versus late in the day, early in a tournament versus late in a tournament or series. So those are questions that often come up. Are you having a hard time picking the pitch up out of the pitcher's hand, or you hammer it in the machine but not at live BP? So there's a lot more questions we can talk about, but very sport relevant questions. So it's important for us to screen sensory processing as well, not just vision. No two brains see alike. Some brains overprocess the sensory system, some are underprocessing, meaning some are more sensitive, some are not. There's sort of a gatekeeper in the brain called the reticular formation, for those who care, that can sort of filter out how we process the information coming in. And so we can get into that too if anybody has any questions. But we're only as strong as our weakest link, and it's important for athletes to dig into other qualities such as their physical qualities, their genetic makeup, their height, their muscle mass, their speed, their balance, their oxygen intake, their vision, but also their coordination, their grit, their likelihood to get injured, their general competitiveness, how much they enjoy their sport. There's so many links in the system. The ever important 10,000 hour rule, there was a meta-analysis study that showed that the hours spent on practice only accounts for 18% of success of performance in the end. And so it just does force us to investigate these other qualities. Our brain is trapped in this little black box called our skull. And it's using the information from our sensory system. Vision, touch is a big one. Touch isn't just touch, it's proprioception, like you've already talked about, feel, interoception, being able to, count our breaths, count our pulse, being able to turn our attention inward on ourself, gravity and balance, body awareness, and then the other senses like smell and chemosensing, hearing, taste. But there's also input that we're bringing in, like energy, self-talk, thoughts, and ego. Whatever input we're taking in is what our brain is receiving. And this is how we're linked to the world around us, how we survive, how we perform. It's the first step in any motor command, whether it's hitting, pitching, catching, defensive work. And to be able to tune into the sensory system leads to ultimate consciousness and awareness and eventually subconscious regulation. It's incredibly powerful. And our brain is honestly just making the best guess it can to process what we are experiencing in the world around us. And we're all going to experience the world differently than the guy next to you. We all process our sensory system differently. So our eyes, that gets us to vision. Our eyes are literally a part of our central nervous system. It's part of our brain, squeezed out of our cranium into these two little goodies. And 50% of our brain is linked with vision, whether it's emotion, whether it's activity, whether it's visual processing. And so I feel that it's absolutely necessary for athletes to train their vision and their sensory system and to leverage this for performance. It's low-hanging fruit. And training and developing the eyes is an important part of our permanent athletic development. And then that leads me to the mental side. Visual focus leads to mental focus. When we are seeing well, we're grounded in the present time and space. Our subconscious is more likely to be free of self-talk, distractions, anxiety. The body has a funny way of being more instinctive, and you can ground yourself. You can ground yourself in the present time and space, and advance with abandonment. Our brain can only really do one thing well at a time, so to filter out the distractions is extremely important. And so combining, Alan's breath work and quiet eye discipline, that fixation that you were talking about, leads to a truly quiet mind and wordlessness. It's incredibly powerful. And this gets us into the right brain. Right brain processes information at 11 million instructions per second versus our left brain, which is 40 instructions per second. And so if we can prime our brains for right brain and stay there, that is called flow state. That's when the world slows down. Literally, it's like the camera on our phones that is slow-mo, it's more frames per second. It's the same thing with right brain versus left brain. So that being said, like, what the heck is this? There's 3 basic phases to the program. The foundational phase 1 is just building a good ocular motor system. Kind of like I touched on before, there's more to vision than just 20/20. The way that our eyes have muscles that need support, that need development, strength, and flexibility. And so to these kids, I'm not exaggerating. Out of the hundreds of kids that I have evaluated, I think there are 1 or 2 ever who have a truly good system. And I will blame a lot of that on screen time. And we can touch on that earlier. But building a good ocular motor control, breaking the spasms that screen time can cause. I hate to overpromise this, but it's my 3V program. 3V stands for vision, vestibular, and vagus. When the kids do this program, I hate to overpromise, but you and your kids do not even have to believe that it works for it to work. Just building a stronger visual system, and you see miracles in sensory training. And the vestibular and the vagus, Dr. Cormier at Nerve Health Institute gave me some tricks to kind of sneak in a couple of other important parts of the system. But after that program, kids are picking up on, off-speed pitches and late breaks better, able to square up. And I don't even talk about that because I'm not going to lie, I don't know what to talk to them about. They just click the link and do the exercises, and they're talking to me about lace spin and squaring up and making wiser decisions, not swinging at bad pitches as much, which is so cool because they're being their own coach. Their average is going up, hitting more multi-base hits and homers. And then kids with real problems like suppression and a weaker system, they get better, but this also serves as a screening so that I can say, you know what, bud, I think you need to go get evaluated. Here's a list of sports vision doctors somewhat close to you if you can't travel that far. I have a document on my website to take to your eye doctor for other measurements to take that they may have not taken regularly. So getting them in with an eye care professional, this is also turned into an important screening. There's a study out there, I forget who did it, and it was a while ago, but 1 in 4 kids who see 20/20 have an ocular motor disorder that can affect sports and learning. And so it has screened those kids out. But when we have kids with a stronger ocular motor system, they can see better. They're seeing things they've never seen before, like lace spin or late breaks or the periphery or the W on the catcher Wilson glove. And so I've gotten lots of reports that they're calmer. This is translated to mental health. So they're calmer in the box and on the mound because their system just has less interference and noise. The second phase of the program is actual behavior, gaze behavior and flow. How to point your eyeballs and where to point your eyeballs. This requires a little technology. This is where that quiet eye fixation that you and I have talked about comes in. We can see if they're doing it. Right now, these kids, aren't doing what they think they're doing, and the video feedback doesn't lie. But right now you have to come to my office for this because of the technology. I am working on a remote program so that coaches can bring this into their organizations. We also have a technology called the focus band, which tells you, you know, if you're in your right brain or your left brain. And again, it doesn't lie. These kids think they're calm, but they're not. And when they make a mistake, it shows them in real time, like, you know, they'll hear them go, and, you know, you'll see their focus band score go low, that mution, that wordlessness space. And I can point to them and say, do you see what you did there with that negative self-talk? Stop it and be kind to yourself. That's getting you nowhere. And sometimes just seeing that feedback resonates with a 15-year-old better than me just jabbering at them. So that's been powerful, getting them out of their monkey mind. And then the third part of the program is mental imagery, whether that's visualization. We can get into trauma imagery and narrative reprocessing because our brain processes images better than words. So I'm sure each coach has their own version of this, but there is some science backing up the right way of opening those neural circuits and making that real life performance come easier with less effort. So this is also where video prep work is important. You know, kids who are obsessed with video, that kind of sets them apart from being average to being great. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. You know, this project, if it helps one kid, we're happy, but if it helps a million kids, we're happy. It's worth it. We're not quite to a million, but we've helped a lot, and we're having a lot of fun along the way. And the ultimate goal, and I'm going to borrow Alan's word, is freedom and quiet. This project is more about just, it's about passing information along. I feel a bit of a compulsion to share this. I can't help it. It's like, oh my goodness, this is the coolest thing. Let's just tell everybody about it. Because there's suffering out there. Where I really care is these kids, and making this information deliverable to a 12-year-old. We just had our first club season with my 9U, and it was interesting, and we have a long way to go. And the behavioral tools that God gave all of us that are accessible to anyone, this information should be available to all athletes and their parents. And the multi-generational support is incredibly important, because the emotional health we develop in childhood follows us to forever. And so what this is really about is turning boys into great men and girls into great women through movement and teamwork and achievement and confidence and breaking barriers. So y'all have already talked a lot about that, just with, you know, the artistic side of sports, the creative side of sports. So yeah, that's the program in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions, here I am.
Yeah, so thank you, Doc. What a great opening. And I took some notes that I'm going to need to follow up with you on.
You're recording this though, right? I mean, you can always go back and.
Yeah, but I still have follow-up questions. Advance with abandonment. We'll talk about that later. Advance with abandonment. Bill has his hand up, so we'll get to you, Bill. Unmute yourself, buddy, and then we'll take questions after Bill. So Bill, fire away. Thank you.
Well, first, it's a compliment. My son actually started working, it was about a month ago. Dr. Bailey. And
where did he go? He was here for a second.
Oh, he's out hitting.
Oh, okay.
he said, I don't want to talk. So
that's okay.
I'm gonna go hit. But he basically, so we've been doing a lot of high velo work in the backyard, and it's got a machine and it's cranked up, and he started barreling the ball, you know, and he says, I don't see that, like, well, then he just described something the other day, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're seeing the ball better, because he said, we were out, it was dark, and he said, I really didn't see it well at the beginning. And he goes, but I changed he went far to close, and he just said, at close, he goes, it was so clear. But it's you know, obviously he's practicing, but two, he really is actually becoming addicted to some of the exercises. So I just wanted to commend, so for anybody who's listening, it is type of things that these exercises that you can do at home, and it's I think she's phenomenal, and I know your passion has been, you're really delving into this beyond just what your current knowledge is, and that's what I just wanted to commend you on it, because I'm seeing it, and I start to hear a few comments, and I'm seeing the progress, and at the percentage of barrels, I mean, we're doing 50 miles an hour at like 22 feet, so it is it's in there fast, and he doesn't have a lot of time, but he's probably doubled the percentage of
Well, don't commend me, commend him.
Henry.
Don't commend me, commend him, because he's doing the work. This is, I have colleagues on this call, and our job is to evaluate for any breakdown and to see where there's opportunity to improve. But the problem, and this is any great program, and I've talked to great coaches, the problem's compliance. Because this is not fun. I'm not gonna lie. Like the work is, you'd rather, it causes a little limbic friction, it's something that you have to be motivated to do. And it's only 15 to 20 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week, but it's just one more thing to do, but it is meaningful. And so I commend him for doing it.
Well,
and for you for your support.
I wanted everybody to know that you absolutely pegged where he was going to be off in your testing. I think he tested 2010 or whatever on his thing, but you go, here's where most of the kids are off, and it was like, boom, there's the big disparity of where he's off. And so, and we're kind of excited for him to just keep doing it, and then have that retested and see if he's made the improvements, which I'm sure he is. So.
Well, that's where I get so tickled as a clinician. I had a kid who came in about 3 weeks ago, and he had a right eye suppression. His brain was just not registering it. He just wasn't using it. He was ignoring it. And 2 weeks on the program, he turned it on, and it's the same stuff y'all are doing. And he came in, and I retested suppression, and I thought, okay, well, that eye woke up, so that's cool clinically. He's injured, so he's not hitting, but it's just fun to see the clinical improvement too.
Awesome.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. Chris, we're going to get to you next real quickly before we get to Chris. The thing about vision training, one of my first students, dating myself here, was Mike Lieberthal. And he was the first time, this is probably 1990, and he was seeing Dr. Harrison, who, is world famous, and his son Ryan now is continuing on. And it's just cool that I heard about this in 1990. And not that it wasn't around before that, but Mike saw Dr. Harrison. Dr. Harrison was working with a lot of people. So I think it's just a reminder that there's a lot of good information out there, and sometimes, for whatever reason, it takes a while to get to the world. But that's why we're having Dr. Bailey on today, because I hope this is something everybody here today really takes advantage of and starts looking into it, because there is a lot of benefits available, lots, life-changing, not game-changing. Chris, thank you for your patience. Fire away, buddy.
Yeah, so I do have a question as it relates to vision, but quick story first is, as I heard this quote a long time ago, that vision is for survival and not success. And that the whole reason why we have eyes is so that we can process the world around us, so that we can survive within it, and that we have to be able to turn it on to be able to get to the success level of it. But otherwise, we're just going to process everything around us to make sure that we survive. So I just thought that was fitting for this. On a question side of it, I was wondering if you could touch on the importance of hydration as it relates to being able to You know, so one thing that I learned, and I learned this personally, since March of this year, I've lost 153 pounds. And through that process,
Congratulations.
thank you. Through that process, my vision completely changed. And the doctors would tell me, blood pressure will change, all this stuff will change. My vision changed. I used to have to wear bifocals. Those are gone. My left eye, the vision is dramatically improved. And they talked about the hydration level, and then that relates to blood pressure. But then we started talking about how that relates to athletes, and just being properly hydrated can instantly change your vision and the ability to process. So I was wondering if you could touch on that a little bit, because that might be something that as coaches, we might not be able to. I saw a question there in the chat about, what can we do to get them in before testing and things like that. I thought maybe the hydration side of it might be something we can do as coaches, or monitor more as coaches a little bit quicker, possibly than getting them in for some testing or things like that into the programs while we wait for that. If you could touch on that, it'd be great. Thank you.
Well, I also have a dry eye clinic, and we have an IV hydration little booth here too. So clearly I believe a lot in hydration as well, not just drinking enough water, but even bypassing the liver and going straight to your veins and your organs. So you're 100% on point. Hydration's important. Another one I'll throw in there is sleep. Water and sleep make just everything better. Our emotional well-being, our physical well-being. Our eyes are the most metabolically active organ in our body. And so they just need to be properly nourished for that. And that's also going to change the most acute vision changes will happen with blood sugar as well. I have some diabetic patients who have a different prescription in the morning than they do in the evening, because their vision fluctuates so much. So without getting into the, molecules and energy and metabolism, you're 100% right. Good hydration and good sleep will make a huge impact on your vision. As far as the physical qualities of the eye, it's being more hydrated is going to help your tear film. We're creating tears. Imagine like a windshield wiper. If it's raining, you want your windshield wiper to cleanly and evenly make a good tear film. A good film on the windshield. Otherwise, there's nothing more frustrating than crappy windshield wipers. And so if that film isn't evenly bathing the cornea, you're not going to be able to see very well. And then as far as the internal vascular improvements, it's probably a lot of blood sugar and a lot of blood pressure that affected your vision in a positive way. So you're 100% right. Whenever you lost your weight, were you working out outdoors or indoors?
Well, both actually. So
yeah.
I live in Cleveland, Ohio. We do a lot of stuff indoors.
Yeah. Well, just being more active and getting that blood flow going, getting the nourishing your optic nerve and your all those. Your eyes are very vascular, so just moving the blood to your tissues is incredibly powerful too.
It was a very eye-opening experience. No pun intended there, but it actually, for me to be able to take that with players that I work with and things along those lines, the instant impact that it had was huge. And so just the hydration side, like you said, maybe the sleep side, those sort of things instantly can help players, with being able to process. And I saw some stat about, the pupil dilation versus the dehydration and just how dramatic that can be very quickly. And so, as we're putting players through drills and it's hot outside and they're losing, quickly losing electrolytes and things like that, the impact that it has on vision is just as much as it has on anything else. And if we can't see properly, then of course our success is not going to be where we need it to be. So I thought that was something we could quickly touch upon. So thank you for that.
Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's
okay.
And to me, and ladies and gentlemen on the call, I can't I personally went through it, even though I don't play anymore, of course, but I personally went through it and saw the change just like that. And it's unbelievably eye-opening just being properly hydrated. I would have
I
never
love
thought
that.
that much impact on vision.
Thank
Mhm.
you, Chris. By the way, pardon the pun, eye-opening.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. We have Drew and then Chris. So Drew, feel free to unmute yourself. And then Drew, when you're finished, Chris, you'll be up next, okay? Drew, can you, oh, there you go.
Yep.
Great.
Are you gonna hear me?
Yep.
I hear you.
Question for you. I came from a different career in which vision was extremely important. We were taught when you brought up your point about a focal point or focusing on a single point. We were taught that we should not focus on the actual object, because if we do, we'll be late at recognizing change. We were taught to what they called a field of view, focus field of view, where we had to open up the amount of space that we were focusing on and not focus on an object in that field of view. Has your testing and what you've found out about the eye, I learned this 40 plus years ago, 40 years ago. And I know that, so that I don't know if who knows, I was an F-18 pilot for the Navy. So vision was extremely important. And when we were taught to land aboard the ship, we were doing air combat, we were doing bombing runs. We were taught not to stare at the target. If we stared at the ball, landing the Fresnel lens, we picked up movement later. We were later at our reaction. So we were taught to open up our field of view so that we weren't focusing on a singular thing, but on the object in general. As all your studies and all of your stuff is, because I teach that in hitting, to not stare at the ball, but to stare, but to focus on the green in between the pitcher and the hitter. And I find the kids who stare at the ball on breaking balls and cutters, things that move, balls that move, they are later at picking it up versus players that I work with who have the ability to not necessarily focus on the singular object, the ball, but more the space in with which the ball is coming. Is that backed up by any of your studies and what you guys teach?
So, depends who it is. There are studies that show this combination of soft focus and fine focus and a pivot point was the best way. And I can talk about that here in a little bit. But I've had major leaguers who don't do that. And so it comes down to what works best for you. I don't think, I hate to admit this, I don't think there's a teach on that. But there is so to go back to your first question, focal point and fine focus requires a lot of energy. Now you can train it so that you are equipped to put out that energy. But if you haven't trained it, then you're right, it's not going to work. Another thing that I picked up on what you said is being able to use the periphery. Our peripheral vision has our peripheral retina and the neural system. It has cells in them called rods. And then our central vision has cells called cones. And our peripheral vision is going to pick up, it's not as resolved, like we can't see as small of letters with the periphery, but we're going to pick up on light and movement a lot quicker in our periphery than we do with our central vision.
They taught us, we've had to learn scanning patterns because we were taught, and this is one of the things that I go into baseball with, why a line drive at a center fielder or an outfielder is harder to pick up than a ball in the gap, because we were taught that an object coming straight at us is tougher for our eye to pick up than an object moving across our eye, across our vision. That's why we used to fly scanning patterns in the air to pick up movement across the sky versus directly at us. Is that what, so that relates to that, how the eye works?
You're exactly on point. I don't think you just pick any one part of your view. I think it's important to integrate the center with the periphery. And so what we train clinically is it's central peripheral integration. But we need both for that. And you're 100% right. You need to, the periphery is undervalued so much, but we also need to be able to have that fine focus. And I'm not going to lie, everybody does it different. And we can talk more about the tracking program here in a little bit. I mean, I can tell you what the studies say, but what really matters in any sports instruction is to guide the kid with what works best for them and to give them the freedom to tinker with things. And so I can't say that any two kids track the same in reference to hitting. So I don't have a teach for that. I really don't. There is a study. It's a combination of soft focus and then at a certain point and timing it properly, finding a pivot point on the pitchers. And okay, so this is in reference to hitting in the box. The theory, and you can always start with this and let the kid tinker with what works best for him, because he's not seeing the same way you see. We need to all respect that we all see the world different. And but you start in soft focus. When you pick up on the movement of the pitcher, they're starting their wind up. You find a pivot point on the pitcher so you don't start too early. And then that way you can pivot from that pivot point, whether it's the shoulder, the elbow, or the cap, from there to the release of the ball. Because you do need that central vision to pick up on lace spin. And then after you kind of decide this is what this pitch is going to be, again, I've had I've had major leaguers who don't track it all that deep. They've learned how to register into their periphery. They make a decision on where to put that barrel based off where they're predicting where that ball's going to go. They almost feel a 93 versus a 94. But the program, but then I have guys who make the decision early and then they do a quick jump from the after they've decided this is a fastball, curveball, slider, they skip ahead to where they think that ball's gonna hit the barrel and track it deep. And the benefit of tracking a ball deep is to learn how this pitcher's balls break late and then learn and recalibrate as needed. And so I don't have what's funny about my program is I don't really talk about it much. Probably 80% of what I do is improve these kids' ocular motor skills, meaning accommodation. It's very foundational eye movement. So it's called accommodation, binocular alignment, central peripheral integration, and vestibular ocular reflex. Those are foundational visual skills. And when we do that and leave them alone, they pick up on that gaze behavior by themselves. Does that make sense? And that's what I love about the program more than anything, is that we're empowering kids to be their own GOAT.
Awesome.
So
I'm not really answering your question.
No, you did.
Yeah.
No, you did. I mean,
Okay.
It's as science has changed, what they were teaching in the 60s, 70s, and 80s may have greatly changed in 40 years. Especially in how eyes work. And I agree with Chris. I mean, hydration is so important. We saw that. We were taught, the eye is 96% blood or something, fluid. And if you don't have, the right hydration, your blood is not correct. If your blood is not correct, your eyes will never be correct. I mean, I just remember learning all that. But I just remember, you know, how we were taught, we were made to focus on the ball landing, and when we didn't focus directly on the ball, but on the whole lens itself, we all picked up movement in the ball, which is, I mean, this is life and death. Baseball is really, you know, unless there's a ball coming at your head, but you know, this is life and
No,
death.
it's war.
Aircraft
It's
carrier.
war.
And it was just amazing the difference in how quickly you could see the minute movement in you know, in landing. That was just why I was wondering if that same, what they were teaching 40 years ago has been still scientifically sound advice. You know, otherwise I need to relearn some things about the eye. But I
think it's
appreciate
good
all
to
your
give a
input. Thank you.
kids. Well, I hope that helped. What if I was a coach, which I'm not, I would give a kid something to start with and then leave them alone. Like let them figure the rest out on their own. And maybe ask some guiding questions like, okay, what did you feel there? What did you feel there? The eye tracking program. And it's all it really does is it's a pair of glasses that show you where the kid is pointing their eyes. So I can't tell you if they're in soft focus or fine focus. But it tells them what they're doing and what happens before the pitch is just as important as the hit. Their prep for the hit is important, but what's also been really funnily important is what they do after the hit. You know what Alan was talking about, that quiet eye fixation. To offset that fixation at the point of contact a touch longer than what feels natural, keep their eyes down. Because what happens if they don't, they anticipate and move their eyes too early. And they move their eyes too early and then their mechanics go to crap. So I think it's good to give a kid like a 12U a starting point and then empowering them to have to think this is what works for me. That's what doesn't. The eye tracking program that we're developing, we look for patterns. Like this is what you did on a good hit. This is what you did on a crappy hit. So let's do less of that and more of that. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Lauren, thank you so much. We're going to unfortunately have to wrap this up soon. Chris, I know you had a question. If you can, Dr. Bailey is on Twitter, which I know is X. Maybe you can send her a DM and follow up with her. And I know, Bill, you had your hand up as well. But Doc, number one, thank you for enlightening us all on this incredibly important topic. And I like the term life-changing, not game-changing. It's life-changing stuff. And it's really an honor to have you on here. And, you know, hopefully this really spurs people on to start delving into this world because it's real. It's very real. And do you want to say anything on the way out? Because I know I cut you off there a little bit.
So mean.
Just trying to keep the show moving along.
No, I'm playing. I'm good. Thank y'all for having me and for the questions. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I'll answer some of these questions in the meeting chat too.
Oh, great idea. And then also, Doc, do you want to tell them best way to get a hold of you? Twitter?
I'll put my email in the meeting chat.
Perfect.
And then Twitter. I look at my DMs every few days.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks again. Appreciate
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. I have follow-up questions for you.
Uh-oh.
All right, moving right along. How much fun is this? Lucky to bring to the adult table. We got such a running inside joke. It's hysterical. But you know, one of the
I'm
fun
somebody now.
one of the fun parts about hosting this and doing this is that I get to see people. In Dr. Bailey's case, we've only met in the last few months. In Perry's case, I've known for 30 years. and a lot of people may not know this, even though I always mention that if I'm on podcasts and they ask me about J bands, I always give Perry credit. But on top of the many, many things Perry has done to tremendously influence the baseball world, he also was a key player in the origin of J bands, because Perry used to make, what a shock, Perry was a position player at Cal State Northridge who played with the Twins and had some arm issues. And so they took him through some rehab exercises in the late 80s. And what a shock. Perry, being as tuned in as he is, said, oh man, my arm is at a different level. And so he picked up on the band work and band exercises in general. So long story short is, Perry and I met 30 years ago, and we started talking about this. Luckily, I just finished my yoga training, and I thought, well, elasticity makes sense to me, and the whole idea of prehab versus rehab. So just a little backstory that Perry and I used to meet at a Denny's about halfway between us, where he would drop off the J bands that he made. By the way, every J band, which at the time were called Weisolators, we changed them to J bands. Perry made by hand in his home until he got tired of making them. So there's some backstory. Perry has become world famous now for his effective velocity, also known as EV. It's amazing to see Perry. I've known him for so long, and see him continue to grow and continue to, when I say impact, I mean impact the baseball world in many ways, not just hitting, pitching, J bands. And without saying too much more, I will say this, it didn't seem like a coincidence that two of the teams he spent a lot of time with his EV with this year were the Diamondbacks and the Rangers. And I don't know, it's just interesting to see how those teams that were not necessarily slated to do, to get as far as they went, pretty much dominate their path on the way there. So that'll give you a tiny bit about Perry, but he's another Cal State Northridge alum, and in the Cal State Northridge Hall of Fame, by the way. And without any further ado, Perry, we're so fortunate to have you on here to enlighten us with your genius, brother. So fire away.
Well, that's tough to follow up with that, both with Dr. Bailey and then that intro. Holy smokes. So being at the adult table is very cool. I watched from afar for a long time, and so thank you. The impact you've had on this sport too is profound. And I always used to think to myself, man, Alan goes out there and he does this thing, and he does arm care, arm circles, and mental training, but it's such a key portion of every single thing that you do in the sport is about, if you're not healthy, you can't play. So kudos.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kudos to taking that to a whole nother level.
Thank you.
Effective velocity. I got a couple of little things I want to share. So hopefully I can share the screen at some point. Because effective velocity is very visual. And it's understanding how speed works and how deception works and how timing works. And vision is a gigantic part of that. I mean, I was experimenting with how you see things. And when I first really kind of broke into the world of the pro world was with Carlos Pena. And it was fascinating because I had no idea how to convince him. And he's like, he heard about me. We talked. He was struggling. This was 2009. And he said, man, I'm a hit it guy. I can't imagine myself ever like sitting on a pitch and hunting a pitch. And I said, well, would you agree that 0-2, 1-2 counts are like the most reactionary? See it and hit it counts? Yeah. I go, well, you're hitting 0.85 in those counts, and you're leading the majors in strikeouts right now. So my question is are you going to hit worse than 0.85? And are you going to strike out more than that? So what do you got to lose? So I said, you might face Bobby Jenks tonight. This goes way back. and he's going to throw 98, 99, and he's going to throw it at the top of the zone, and it's going to have a weird rise effect. And your barrel is going to be about a foot below it. Have you had success with him? No, I rarely put the ball in play against him. Okay. So if you face him tonight, I want you to imagine not that the ball's 98, because your brain automatically goes to 95 when you do that. I want you to go from 98 to the fact that it's elevated and you have to hit it further out front. So I want you to think about it around 110. It's not really that fast, but I want you to think about it in terms of 98 being 110. So really speed up this process, because where you think the ball's at in space and where it's actually at in space is different. It's like a video game to me. And so you have to get your barrel to a place that's very uncomfortable. So I want you to really over exaggerate. And then I want you to imagine not being one baseball, not being two baseballs, but I want you to be three baseballs above that. And he's like, what? I go, I want you to feel like you're going to swing and miss it, because you're normally going to be a foot under it. So where you see it in space, your brain is going to take your barrel to about a foot below it normally. So you have to compensate. And if you don't compensate, you're going to struggle. So I'm thinking this is my last talk with him, right? He hangs up. Next day I get a call. Hey, did you watch the game? And I go, no, I didn't see it. What happened? He goes, well, I got a chance to hit against Jinx, and for whatever reason, I decided to try it. Like, what do I got to lose? And we had a guy at third base, and I hit a scoring fly ball, and we ended up winning. It was just a sac fly, but I moved the ball forward, which was weird, and I broke my bat, which is very weird because I was trying to be at 110, and in reality, I was late enough to break my bat. So I know I wasn't at 110, and I was trying to get over it, and I was under it because I hit a fly ball. So for the first time in my life, I understand now what timing means to me, and the illusion of the stuff that's going on that makes me swing and miss so often. And so there's a weird vision thing that happens with baseball. There's a bunch of them. There's a short arm effect. There's a rise effect where the ball seemingly rises. It doesn't, but it seems like it does because it doesn't lose. It doesn't start to sink as quickly as we're used to with some guys. And there's a cutter effect. Carlos would tell me that Mariano's ball moved a foot. And I'm like, no, it moves like 2.5 or 3 inches, 6 when he really wants it to move. It doesn't move a foot. But in his mind, it moved a foot because there's this weird illusion that the ball is normally going to do this, right? It starts off straight and then it sinks and it moves away. So a right-handed pitcher would be throwing arm side run, so it would sink away from Carlos. And this pitch doesn't. This pitch stays straight and it holds its line better. And so when you watch Kenley Jansen throw 30 cutters in a row and get away with it, it's because the illusion is so strong, because the ball's not doing what a normal pitch starting down that path does. So there's this weird net effect of a foot of missing space that your brain has a tough time figuring out what to do with. It's not hard, it's just different. And so when you understand what the illusions are, then you can kind of add or subtract whatever it is that you have to do in order to get to the barrel to the right place. So that year, we started work in like August. And for 2.5 months, he hit a homer every 8.5 at bats. Strikeouts went down 25%. His on base percentage, or his on base was like off the chart. He had 100 ribbies that year. And he missed a month of the season and was co-home run champion with Mark Teixeira. But his couple things happened that were very strange. One, he already was one of the leaders in not chasing outside the zone, but his chase rate even went down. When we started looking at things differently, his two strike approach almost tripled his production in 2 strikes, and his chase rate went from 20% down to 18, which is unbelievable, to actually hit the ball harder and yet not strike out, which is one of the things that is so cool about my work with Oklahoma softball, is that they hit more homers than strikeouts. They've shattered every record in the history of the sport because they look at things completely different. They look at how do you hit completely different. And I'll say it like this. One of the other stories I told that kind of pushed Carlos over the edge is I said, if you don't like to sit pitches, imagine this. And I already talked to him about his two-strike abilities. I said, imagine Roger Clemens. I did a 3-year study on him, and in 0-2 counts, he's got a batting average against him at 0.85. So what do you think is happening there? Is he, you're basically out, right? If you're 0-2 against Roger Clemens, you're out. And you think any damage is getting done? And he's like, no, guys are probably just putting the ball in play and maybe getting a hit here and there. And I said, so how most people are going to look at him is they're going to go right to the middle of the zone, try to really keep him into that zone. So they're going to look in the middle. And now you're going to allow Roger Clemens to have me looking at the middle, and then he's going to throw a slider and a split finger changeup. They're both going to go down. And how often are they going to be in the strike zone? And he said, probably almost never. Yes, like less than 10% each. And those are probably accidents. And then he's going to throw this fastball. And where's he going to throw it? He's like, he's going to elevate it. So I said, if you go to the middle, now he can beat you on the plus side of speed. He's going to be faster than you're ready. And then he's going to get you to chase down below the zone. So how do you possibly beat him when you're sitting in the middle, allowing him to go in any direction that he wants to? So if I had to face him, I would almost rather have an 0-2 count against Roger Clemens than any other count, because in 0-2 counts, I know what he's going to do. And more importantly, I know what he's not going to do. So if I can train myself to look for the ball in an area, add the necessary speed that I need in order to be on time, not just kind of on time, but 100% on time, then I really like my odds in 0-2 counts. So who's the one guessing? The one sitting in the middle trying to shorten up and really see it good? You're going to get fooled by a Roger Clemens slider or split finger if you're looking in the area where they're going to start. It's going to start and then they're gone. Or it's going to start up here above everything, and now those two are going to look completely different. So it's about teaching your brain how to look for pitches in a completely different way. So the strategy is a very complicated thing, but it comes down to really simple stuff. And I think when you tell, there was an article I read one time that physicists wrote about baseball, and they said if you told everything to an alien about how the eye works and how fast it works and all of the factors, they would tell you that hitting a baseball is impossible, because it just happens at such a fast rate, and your eyes don't work that fast. Your brain does, but your eyes just don't work that fast. So there's this weird thing when it comes to strategy, and part of it is understanding what's going to happen, like the Roger Clemens story. If you know what's going to happen, you're in a completely different mindset than you are if you're waiting to see what's happening. No matter how relaxed we get, no matter how good we are at being in the moment, if you're in a reactionary mode versus an actionary mode, they're two completely different things. The batting average goes down about 100 points when you say the words 0-2. If you're in an 0-2 count, the same exact pitches, there's about 100 points difference in batting average. It's bizarre. They're exactly the same pitch, but the way the hitter looks at it is very defensive, and the way the pitcher looks at it is very offensive. And so there's this weird chasm that happens. So hitters get into this reactionary mode and they're done. So my work is about figuring out how to become actionary, how to take control of the at bat. And Oklahoma has done that in such a great way that they've literally shattered every record that has existed in the sport. And it's there's a lot of weird misideas as to why that's happening. They're just looking at it a different way. They're playing a different game than everybody else is. And that's what was happening with the Rangers and the Diamondbacks. Is Brent has been a longtime follower of effective velocity. I did a lot of work with him all through the Astros days, of trying to get guys to change the way that they look at bats. Like from a pitcher's perspective, and this was a tribute to Vatch, because Vatch was kind of one of my sounding words at the early stages of effective velocity. And you guys were working with Barry Zito and a bunch of other guys, a bunch of other pro guys. And Vatch had a great understanding. And he just kept saying to me, man, I cannot not introduce you guys because I know you're going to help them. And so he was the first guy. And this story will resonate with you, Alan, I think a lot. Because he was a, surfer and a musician and an artist. He was like a very, I don't want to think guy. So effective velocity, my work with him was very basic. And it was like, this is a complicated thing, but I'm going to teach you how not to be complicated. I'm going to make this very simple for you. And because at the beginning he was going crazy. He's like, I just can't, we spent a long time. And he's like, this just doesn't, I feel like I'm pitching myself into a corner. And I said, well, I'm going to make this very simple. I'm going to give you an ecosystem. And the ecosystem, I didn't call it that at the time, but it was basically, here's where you need to throw your pitches. You have these 3 pitches that are all going to come out of the same tunnel. One's going to end up here. So if you throw your fastball elevated and you throw your changeup in the normal area and the slider and then the curveball in the dirt, all of those pitches are going to look identical out of your hand. He was the very first tunnel. That was the invention of tunnels. And it was the idea that if you make it more difficult for guys to see the ball by making everything look alike, and then they all split apart to different areas of the zone at different timings, it's a nightmare to try to plan against because there's no early visual cues, nothing. Everything looks alike. So as long as you follow that basic premise, just throw a pitch and see what happens to them. See if they're late or they're early. See if, what happens. And then you just flow with the way that the game goes in your mind. And that resonated big time with him, with the idea of just being able to not have to think about it and just flow. And that's where the term liquid analytics came from. It's about taking all the numbers and digesting them and then creating a plan that allows you to be able to adjust on the fly. And for pitchers, it's about their ecosystem. There's been a lot of talk about pitch design, but it's really been around about how to make the ball move and how to make the ball, pair up with other pitches, maybe a little bit here and there. But it isn't what the original design was about. The original design was, how do I make every pitch work off of every other pitch, as opposed to having one number 1 pitch, and I don't want to get beat by my number 2 pitch. That's a big thing still to this day. And if I hear that in a conversation, the hitting people that I'm working with at that moment just got a big clue as to what's going to happen in a 3-2, 2-2 count. What are you going to get? Well, I'm not going to get the number 2, 3, or 4 pitch. I'm getting whatever their best pitch is, if that's a slider or if that's a cutter or if that's a fastball. So it's a huge disadvantage to have a number 1 pitch as opposed to having 4 number 1 pitches or 5 number 1 pitches. That gets a little bit off track. There's something that I want to show, and I'm not sure how much time you want to spend on the Q&A part, but interrupt me whenever.
Yeah, I think Perry, just because of time, because we got about 20 minutes, I think no, by all means, if there's something really important to say. I'm a little worried about sharing the host with you because if I don't get it back, which I'm sure I will, it could cause problems. So why don't you do this? Why don't you just either summarize, or if you want to leave on a certain note, and then we'll open up to Q&A. Okay, so why don't you finish your thought if you
Well,
want.
the image I wanted to share was simple. It's the idea that the barrel comes through the zone, and I have a cool little illustration that shows a 3D illustration of a hitter swinging the bat. And so you see the 3D illustration all the way through, right? And so you see all these different bat widths all the way through the zone. And so they're like stationary. And so what I did was just put an animation going down and like it's the bat swinging. And then these 3 baseballs coming out of the pitcher's hand, and they move to 3 different places in the strike zone. But the timing of the barrel runs into all 3 of them, right? So it's like a 93-mile-an-hour pitch that's a fastball away, and then a 90-mile-an-hour pitch that stays in the middle, and then an 87-mile-an-hour pitch that maybe is like a cutter in. And so all 3 of those pitches are all great pitches, but they're all within this area that if you throw them to the wrong place, they have the exact same timing to the hitter. So effectively, they're exactly the same pitch, even though they're 3 completely different pitches going to 3 different areas at 3 different speeds. They're in essence to the hitter because the hitter just makes the one swing and runs into all 3. So part of the work of effective velocity is to understand that. So if you think of all pitches as 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. So 1s are fastballs, but fastballs up and in. 2s are fastballs, but they're away or down. 3s are hard off speed, and 4 soft off speed, like basically a curveball in baseball. About 65% of all pitches right now are 2s and 3s. And virtually every hitter in America has designed their swing to be focused around 2s and 3s. And so the second you understand that concept, you immediately know how to pitch around it. And so from an effective velocity standpoint, if I create a tunnel for Barry Zito or for Brandon Pfaadt or for Justin Verlander that's going to go straight at that area where they're the most geared to, but then they split apart and go to the hardest areas of the strike zone, vastly different, everything changes. So it's once you understand that basic premise that hitters are restricted by what they can see and what they can react to, and pitchers have about 30 miles an hour of speed differential, and hitters can handle about that 6 mile an hour speed differential, everything gets very clear about why effective velocity works. And it works everywhere. Everywhere EV goes, there's winning starts to take place, because the one thing about it is that it's about timing and deception, and it's understanding how those 2 things work and applying actual metrics to what the timing and what the deception actually is.
Love it.
So sorry, I know that went a little long.
Well, no, it's okay, because it's great to put some fodder out there for the group. Let's open it up, Q&A. So feel free to either raise your hand, or we're on the trust system now. If you want to just unmute your microphone, that'd be great too. Otherwise, I'm going to start singing again.
Flynn Rider.
Hey, Perry, you, end of the season before last, you said Bellinger was really close to figuring it out again.
Yeah.
And he had a great comeback season. What did you see that got him out of his, like, what was the shifts that you saw that made you say that? So Perry predicted Bellinger is going to have a bounce back. In fact, you said he's the one guy that could go challenge the big number. So
yeah, I think there's a couple of guys. There's a few people in the sport that could hit 400, and he's one of those guys. if you look at hitting the way I look at hitting, it's like a video game. So hitters all have certain, you can put all hitters into like 3 or 4 or 5 buckets. And obviously there's differences, a little nuanced differences, but the way that they physically swing the bat, when they load, they're either on their back leg or they're against their back leg where they have leverage. If they load on their back leg, they're never going to hit ones very good. If they are rush and get your foot down early, so when they're rushing forward, the ball's rushing towards them, they're not going to hit ones very well. So with him, he was a load and go. Load and go. And then he started to load and go a little bit better. And the second he understands that, his whole life is going to change. He's not as amazing as he was this year. He's not even close to his best self because his load is restricting him still, and his swing plane is restricting him still. If I were going to do video, I was going to show you guys about 30 or 40 swings that hitters were just flailing at this ball that was at the top of the zone. And there's nothing they can do about it because their physical swing is keeping them from dealing with the ball that's at 2 degrees and their swing plane is at 15 degrees. They only meet in this one area. So your timing has to be immaculate. So the second he gets a better load, I think he's going to give 400 a run. But we'll see whether that ever happens. I don't know. I've never had any interaction with him. But Corbin Carroll is a guy that I think also could make a run at that with the D-backs. I didn't talk to their hitters at all, although I did do a couple of hitting plans for them during the playoffs, and I think they listened a little bit. But my work was with Brent,
Beautiful.
which was very fun.
We're gonna get that firsthand fun from Brent before too long. Anybody else? Effective velocity questions?
Yeah, I have something. Hey, Perry, my name's Baker. I talked to you a little bit last year and implemented effective velocity with my high school program in Arkansas, and it went really well. We saw our hard hit percentage go down by about 20%. You know, our staff had a lot of success with it. As
Awesome.
I am game planning for next year and looking into how to attack hitters with effective velocity, one thing that I've always kind of had a conflict about that I'd like your opinion on is when facing opposite-handed hitters. You know, most of the time in a lot of your work, you talk about how, you know, avoiding the fastball down and away and going fastball up and in is kind of the way to attack with the fastball. But with opposite-handed hitters, if a righty's facing a lefty, if they're working off that fastball up and in, it seems like it's much harder to tunnel the slider and the changeup off of that in order to create, you know, a good tunnel there. So where do you find the balance? What do you think about? Do you think it's more important to have the effective velocity speed differential, so to go with the plus fastball up and into that lefty and give up some of that tunneling? Or is it better to, you know, work that fastball a little bit more outside where it's going to tunnel better with that slider that's going to go into them and that changeup that's going to go away from them there?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is it can vary a little bit. The most important factor is the time that they have to see and be able to react to pitches, right? So the ultimate deception is when I can take every single known out of the equation. So a black belt, which doesn't exist, a 10th degree black belt in effective velocity, would have every pitch would look like, if I'm going to throw a 2-seamer, it would have this tilt and this look. My changeup would have that look and that tilt. My curveball would have the opposite of that. And so every single pitch that I throw would delay this person's ability to hit it. And when you, interesting. when you got a little distracted there, got some interesting stuff going on in the chat. If you create better speed differentials, your pitchers are going to get better, even if the tunnels aren't great. But if you can figure out a way to make the tunnels great, one of the things we did with Brandon Pfaadt right away was to try to ask him if he was comfortable moving over on the pitching rubber, because by moving on the pitching rubber one way or the other, you change the angle at which your pitches come out. So if you're a right-handed pitcher throwing to a left-handed batter and you're throwing pitches.
All right, hold on. We've only had a couple of these today. Sorry, Perry.
No, you're good.
I'm getting okay at removing people pretty fast, though.
I like it. I like it. So the angle at which you start the pitch is dramatic. It can change things dramatically. So when you understand that, I mean, so the first thing is that you can move around on the rubber. The other thing is that you can manipulate how you make the ball move in order to create different movements, because that's what all pitches are, right? Is they're different versions of how do I throw it, make it look like a fastball, and then move to another part of the strike zone. This has been a tough thing for me to get through to people, is that your fastball is supposed to be fast. And where's the fastest area is up and in. So if you want to throw to the outside part of the plate, don't you want to throw to the outside part of the plate with lesser speed? So it creates this huge differential. So if I throw a cutter away and a fastball in, they have a huge speed differential and they're in the same tunnel. So if you understand how movement works, and this was one of the things that way back in 2006 in book 3, Downright Filthy Pitching, we talked about it, because I had never seen any of the gurus that out there in the world had never talked about how does the ball move in space and how do you make it move. And so I was describing how you create different tilts and different ways that you can manipulate your fingers to try to make different movements happen, because once you understand that a tunnel is important, well, how do I get the ball to go to that part of the zone? How do I get it to go to the other side of the strike zone? And the answer is you play around with angles and you play around with different movements. And it's a lot easier to make movements happen than you might think. You can get a change up to go in a couple different directions by understanding how the physics of that works.
Yeah, and real quick follow-up on that. You talked about moving on the rubber, and I know we've seen Paul Skeens do that as well. I can't quite get a consensus. To correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your opinion is that if you're facing a lefty and you're a righty, it's more beneficial to create the tunnel from the third base side of the rubber and vice versa. I've seen different opinions on that, so I just wanted to confirm that
That's
that
a
was
total case by case.
Okay.
I did this experiment early on, way back. And I had these 3 kids, they were all 14, they were all right-handed. And I set up my camera in one place, thinking that their release point was going to be similar. But one of them was way over here. The other one was right over the top. And the other one was like this, where he actually leaned over and threw like a left-handed pitcher. So it's very depends totally on what their release point is, what their body position is like at the moment of release. So you got to take a lot of factors into account, but I would say by and large, I agree that right-handed pitchers should be on the third base side against lefties, but not all of them. I mean, Brandon Pfaadt is very effective on the left side because of where he lets go of it, at the angle that he lets go of it. So that it's different for every pitcher. Everyone's unique. So I don't like to generalize very much about too many things, but that's one of them. Definitely don't generalize. You have to videotape it and find out where they're at and what their ball looks like, and then make that decision. Does that help?
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Hey, Paradog, I know you mentioned something a second ago. I'm not sure how much into detail you went, but can you just make sure, I know it's some of the more basic stuff about EV. But just talking again about the differential between inside and outside, the perception of like taking 90-mile-an-hour fastball down the middle.
Yeah.
Just talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, people think that what I'm talking about is an illusion. Like it's a, I mean, if I'm in an airplane and I'm going to land in LA, but it gets diverted to San Francisco, still on that same coast, but it's going to be a very different landing time, right? So if you throw a 90-mile-an-hour pitch and it's on the outside part of the plate, I'm going to hit it back here, way back here. So there's a physical place that I have to hit that pitch if I'm going to do damage. So as the pitch gets closer to the middle, I hit it about 18 inches further in front of that spot. And every time I move the ball 6 inches laterally, it changes my reaction time by 18 inches as the bat comes through the zone. So there's a time that's involved with that. So I can cheat, right? I can cheat and hit the up and in pitch like this, which is what a lot of big leaguers do. That's why the average exit velocity up there is 10 miles an hour slower than it is away. So it's about 84 miles an hour for fastball exit velocity, because hitters do this and they cheat their swing. Instead of hitting it out there where they need to hit it in order to do damage, they cheat and let the ball get slower by having more time. But in reality, it's a real thing, and it's about 9 miles an hour from up and in to down and away is the change. It's dramatic. At 90, at 70, it's not that much. It only changes about, for every 6 inches, it changes about 1.7 miles an hour. So it's not as much of a change. The faster the pitch gets, the more the effect of changing location changes the speed of the pitch. So a lot of guys are throwing 95 miles an hour, but they're really throwing at 91. And then they're throwing that 88-mile-an-hour slider, but they're really throwing at 89. So they're throwing 2 miles an hour apart and have no idea. And when you look at all of the data, it's always the same. Those two pitches, when they get closer in speed, are just getting crushed. But the radar gun says that they're throwing at 95 and 88, but the reality is, no, they're not. Their true reactionary time is where it's your speed plus the location or minus the location, depending on where it's at.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. I remember the first time you ever told me about EV, which I don't even know if you called it EV back then, but that's when you know you go back a long time with someone, when it predates the terminology. But I remember the thing that stuck out with me, because I was still playing on Sundays, was like 90 down the middle was like 93, 94 in. Let's not talk about up and down for a second, but just 93, 94 in, but 87 away, 86, 87 away. And the high, and you used to use this term, I don't know if you still use it, but crossing over. And so if you throw like 90 down the middle away, let's call it 87, and then you throw a changeup accidentally in at 80, which is now 84, you're crossing over, and hitters, maybe still your term, hitters get on time accidentally.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the damage is done. You want to talk about that further?
There's a study going on at Biola University right now. They're done with the first two phases of it. And what the first phase was the same test that I did in 2004 with Inside Edge, because I did a massive amount of studies. And trust me when I tell you, I tested kids from 10 all the way up to minor league kids as to what they could see and what they couldn't see and recognize. Spin, when did they see spin? Where did they see it? When could you see up, down, in, or out? When could you tell the difference between speed? And so most of the time, I think whenever you hear someone talk about that, it stems from that original research, because what you see in the first third of the flight is direction. You can see up, down, in, or out, and every kid sees that. Every kid that we tested from 10 could instantly see the difference between down and away and up and in. So immediately, you know, if I'm throwing fastball down and away and up and in, a 10-year-old kid's going to see the difference between those two. And so the other thing that we found in the testing was hitters have about 5 miles an hour of reactionary ability, unless you make the down and away fastball and the loopy curveball so obvious. Now they can hit 30 miles an hour of speed differential if you make it obvious. But if you tunnel it, every hitter goes away. Meaning, I don't care how good they are. Mike Trout, one of the best in my lifetime for sure. He's awful when it comes to tunneled fastballs. His average exit velocity is about that of a 13-year-old kid in my. He literally averages 73 miles an hour of exit velocity in the up and in box of the strike zone on fastballs. So how that's not the only pitch that ever gets thrown to him is amazing to me, but that's the reality of it. No hitters in the history of baseball have the ability to see a pitch coming in and then have the fastball turn into its fastest version, the slider move away and turn into the slowest version of itself. Nobody's good at that because it's hard. It's like so ridiculously hard because there's no clues. So everybody who understands the tunneling concept instantly gets better overnight. But what Biola found was 91% of all hard hit balls between 2016 and 21, they use 5 years of StatCast data. 91% are breaking EV rules of all the hard hit balls. So 9% of hard hit balls happen when pitches are tunneled and there's the right speed differentials between them. So if you're literally talking about being able to take away not all 91%, but let's just say that you could possibly affect half of that. So your hard hit ball rate could get cut in half by just simply understanding that there's these rules. And if you break those rules, like tunneling, if you don't tunnel, I can see it. The hitters in the big leagues and the hitters at the college softball world can see the difference between when a pitch is here and here. Like when they're just slightly different, they see that. And if they see it a few times, it's only a matter of time before they start to react to that and start to actually act on that pitch. So what my work is with hitters is to train them to know exactly which pitches are going to cross over and then be able to recognize what that's going to look like. And that it's like it instantly changes everything because now I'm not guessing anymore. They're like JT Gasso, the hitting instructor for Oklahoma. He's like, there's nowhere to hide. Once you understand how to look at a pitcher through the EV lens, you see every single thing about them that's going to be a mistake. And you take advantage of every one of it. Like you're 3 chess moves ahead. There's no more guessing. And so it's like a little decoder ring, you know, that we used to have as kids. You'd send off for it, or you get it in the box of Cheerios or whatever. And that decoder ring is effective velocity. When you add or subtract the location effects of the pitch, of the speed of the pitch, everything gets really clear as to why things are happening. And it's all about deception, and deception is about making it take you longer to see my pitches. So if every one of my pitches look the same and then they're not, that's a nightmare. And if every one of them are going to the place where your chase rate's the highest, plus it's the fastest pitch I could throw in that area, I'm maximizing every single element that a pitcher has at his disposal. So it's about taking a pitcher and taking away all knowns to the hitters. I don't even want my pitchers to have a 3-0 tendency. I want them to throw 4 different pitches in 3-0 counts so that I can't even look at a 3-0 count and go, I know that this is what you're going to do. I want at no point in the strike, in any one of the sequences, any one of the counts, that there is an absolute about anything. So if I have 5 number 1 pitches or 3 number 1 pitches, how do you know what's coming? And the answer is you can't. It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult.
Parrot, appreciate it, brother. And I don't mean to cut you off, but we're getting into the next round. I want to make a couple comments. One, Perry's one of the first human beings in the baseball world that I really was able to go into some deep rabbit holes with, and I have so much respect for what Perry's done and is continuing to do. I would urge you to, Perry's written a number of books, and I'm sure he's got stuff online, but I would urge you to get with Perry, whether it's through Twitter, through his website, but delve into this stuff because, again, as I said at the opening, it's pretty cool to think that he was in with the D-backs and the Rangers on the way to the World Series and Oklahoma softball, and it goes on and on. So, that's why we're here today, is we're just trying to, get better and learn. And so it's there for the taking. And Perry is also one of the all-time easy access guys. So not hard to track down. He'll give you the time of day because, like all of us, he just wants to help and make a difference. And so, I just can't say it enough. I would urge you to get with Perry. And Per, welcome to the. He and I have a running joke now, so I have to play it to the hilt. But Perry, I appreciate you. Is there anywhere else you want them to get a hold of you that I mentioned?
They can. My website's effectivevelocity.com. My Twitter feed is at evperryhusband. They can email me at perryhusband@gmail.com. We're probably going to do some specials as a result of this. So if you guys DM me or if you email me, I'm going to do some big discounts on some stuff.
Well, maybe if you can remember when you email them or DM them, just mention Jaeger Sports and Friends, right?
Yeah.
Maybe get a bonus on top of a bonus. You never know.
Nice.
Thanks a million, Paradox.
You got it.
Yep. Passing the baton. First of all, we all good out there? I mean, it's unbelievable. We've had close to 60 people on from the beginning. I'm so impressed, and it's actually inspiring. So thank you to everybody for, taking time out of your day. This is so cool. I love this. I'm getting